There's absolutely no justification for treating this particular group of people different than the rest. It's just what's in us. It's our fear, it's our anxiety, and then it gets codified in some religious book, and suddenly we have justification for treating people bad.
There seems to be an obsession with sodomy.
Right. I don't know what that is, man. And then they just don't quite know what to say about the women.
Hello, and welcome to the first episode of On the Edge with Andrew Gold. This being the inaugural one, I should probably tell you a little about myself and the podcast. I'm a documentary maker and TV presenter by trade. You can watch my documentary about an abusive exorcist in Argentina, for example, on YouTube or BBC iPlayer. And I've made films on everything from UFOs and porn to abortion and infidelity. Over the years, with my documentary hat on, I connected with so many people on the edge of society who I found absolutely fascinating, but didn't quite fit the stories that TV channels were looking for. So I thought, why not bring these characters to you via a podcast? So this podcast is a weekly look at the people around the world that I find utterly absorbing. Whether it be the world's first blogger talking about his father's suicide in their home, an ex-Muslim whose family is trying to kill her for blasphemy laws, or the female Mormon psychopath who tells me she wouldn't care if I died in front of her right there on Zoom. Now, I've got a confession. I'm actually speaking to you from both the distant future and the past, the exact distance of which will depend on when you're listening to this. You see, this being my first episode, I hadn't yet refined my style and format at the time. I also didn't have all the right equipment. It's now 6 months later, and it occurred to me that if you're listening to this now, it's likely the first episode you've heard. It's your first taste of the podcast and will help decide whether you'll subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use. Please do subscribe. So now that I have an expensive microphone, I've gone back and redone this intro to welcome you to the show. And to tell you that, although this is an audio podcast, you can find short video clips from every episode on Twitter and Instagram through AndrewGold_OK, or you can just go to my website where there's a blog, andrewgoldpodcast.com. I bought a nice microphone around episode 4, by the way, so the quality starts to get much better from then on. That said, today's episode, my debut with Nate Phelps, remains one of my absolute favourites because he's so open and so eloquent in the way he speaks about his childhood. It's an intriguing look into the people known as America's most hated family, who picket the funerals of soldiers and hold up brightly coloured signs with hate-filled homophobic slurs. Nate is the son of the church's founder, Fred, or Gramps, Phelps, and was indoctrinated from a young age to hate gay people and espouse the church's quite awful teachings. He talks of the fearful night he fled the church and how he began to adapt to life on the outside. He's a kind and gentle soul, and you can find him on Twitter on @N8Phelps. So here is Nate Phelps.
The video is moving properly. It's not choppy.
Oh, okay. This is a result. This is good. How do I look?
But good.
Yeah, that's better than I looked before. So Zoom must be doing a great job.
It's not working on me, I'll tell you that, man.
Hey, from where I'm looking, it's doing it. It certainly is. Thank you for joining me, by the way. I really appreciate you giving up your time for this.
Yeah, no problem, Andrew.
Oh, it's really nice of you. I just watched. Did you ever watch the Louis Theroux documentaries?
I did, yeah. Before he did the second one, or while he was filming the second one, he actually flew me down from Canada, and I spent a day with him there in Topeka.
Oh, you're kidding. How was that?
Oh, it's great. Obviously, as you know, if you watch the second one, there wasn't anything in there of me. Louis had centered it around those young girls, that were growing up in that environment. And that ended up being the theme going all the way through, where are these kids as time passes?
But that was a nice experience. At least, was he a nice guy?
Oh, yeah, Louis is a good guy. He's got that facade or that image that he puts up there. But you get to talking to him in private, and you find out about his family. And yeah, he's a good guy.
Would you be able to tell me a little bit about the Westboro Baptist Church, just from your own words and your own childhood a little bit?
The Westboro Baptist Church is the church that back in the early 90s started a campaign that they called the God Hates Fags campaign. My father was what I call a hyper Calvinist. He believed that the Bible was the literal, inspired, inerrant Word of God, and that he was the sole source of interpretation and understanding of what the Bible was saying. As far as he was concerned, the rest of the world got it wrong, which is, as I got older, I realized was a common misconception amongst churches. He was a literalist when he talked about the church, the idea that men had authority over women, and that physical corporal punishment was an integral part of bringing up a child. The fact that he used what was called a mattock. It's got a double head on the end of a large, maybe 4.5 foot thick piece of wood. And one end of the head is an axe, the other end is a hoe. And that's what he would use to discipline his kids when they were out of order.
God.
It set things up such that we were pretty much isolated from the rest of the world. Any family members were kicked out. He isolated us from his parents. He believed that the world outside was evil and that he wasn't going to let his kids be influenced.
Wow. It's interesting that it was one of the things I was going to ask you about was the violence, because from the documentaries I've seen, so obviously there were the Louis Theroux, there was one by a guy called Jeremy Kyle, and there's been a lot of talk on sort of Joe Rogan's show with Meghan, for example.
Meghan was on Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I very rarely hear anything about the violence. And
yes.
Reading your website, it was immediately clear to me. And I think it's almost dangerous, because the shows I've seen, and I mean this sort of with a pinch of salt, but it's dangerous because they almost come across as very funny and witty. And yes. Your sister, Shirley, is very funny and biting and acerbic. And I suppose your father was as well. So quick. Shirley, I saw there are times when people are driving past and shouting stuff, and she has replied to them before they've even shouted it. She's that fast. You love to hate them because of that. And I think if you saw one moment of what goes on behind closed doors, any of that cuteness goes away immediately.
Yeah, you're right. This new generation, my nieces and nephews, they grew up in a different reality. Not to say that it's any less controlling and any less destructive as far as personal individual rights and having any kind of capacity to decide for yourself what you're going to do with your life. There just isn't that component of physical violence and raging and an environment of constant fear at that level. I would suggest that there's plenty of fear inside those young people, that next generation, but it's more the doctrinal, those that left, God's going to get you and you're going to burn for eternity in hell, that kind of fear. Existential fear. But our generation, the children of Fred Phelps, that was a completely different environment. I remember Megan actually contacting my older brother Mark and I, because she was struggling through finally coming to terms with the fact, because in that closed system, I was just evil. I was always the troublemaker. I was making stuff up, and so as these kids are growing to adulthood, that's what they know of me. But Megan asked us, and she was pretty upset. She was destroyed that this myth that she saw, this myth of her grandfather, and I imagine to some degree her mother, was just that there was an ugly, darker backside to the story than what she believed growing up there.
Wow. And she got in touch how long after leaving the church?
But she reached out to me like within a week before my father passed. So 6 years ago, so March of 2014.
Okay. Do you keep in touch?
Not anymore. That's kind of a sad story, because that original phone call was her telling me that she had the opportunity, as my father was fading away. He was in a hospice care by then. From the sounds of it, his mind was almost gone. He'd have salient moments. And so she had some emotional time there to say goodbye to him. And had those who had left, with apparently the exception of Megan and Grace, were being kept out away from him, which was kind of, I never wanted to go in and see him, because I just made that assumption, once you're out, you're out. why would they bend the rules all of a sudden just because he was dying?
Sure.
But a lot of them really wanted that opportunity to see him at the end. And so I tried to negotiate, with people I hadn't spoken to in years, and they weren't budging. And finally I said, look, if you're not going to let him in, then I'm going to have to let the media know that in fact he is there. Because there was a lot of speculation, people were saying, oh, is he sick? Nobody's seen him for a while, and that kind of stuff. And I had a couple of reporters there in Topeka who were hounding me pretty regularly. And generally speaking, I would just say to them, I don't know anything, right? Well, suddenly I know something. So I tried to use that as a negotiating tool, and they weren't having it. So I ended up contacting those media guys and telling them that, yeah, in fact, he was there.
A negotiating tool for what? To be allowed in to say your goodbyes?
Yes.
Was that on behalf of your relatives?
On behalf of my siblings,
you didn't want to.
Who wanted to. Like
why were they letting Meghan in and not anyone else?
I don't know. You got to understand there was a very unique relationship, had been since I was a child, between Shirley and our father. Yeah. She was clearly the one who worshipped him and wanted to be like him. Meghan was clearly the one who was being groomed as the next generation. There was an intimacy there that wasn't there with a lot of the other kids.
So what actually went on? Because I think there was a lot of back and forth about the truth about. So it's said that he went out to the Rainbow House across the street and said, "You're good people," and as a result was excommunicated. Is that right?
I had a conversation with one of my nephews who says that they were standing out actually on the porch of the church, and so they're within maybe 100, 150 feet of that Rainbow House. He was in a thoughtful mood, and he made that comment in front of my nephew. I also know as hearsay that my father degenerated into some form of dementia in the final years, that he was put into a house, was left isolated there. But there's also a thread that I heard enough that I'm convinced it was a key part of their decision, and that is that he had gotten soft, as they put it, because it was a very extreme, rigid. See, but another piece you got to understand about this, Andrew, is that there's a lot of judgment in that environment, because you're looking and seeing, does this behavior fit or violate some part of the Word of God? That was drummed into us. If you know them by their fruit, that kind of language. They were ever vigilant. It's just that he built that system up so effectively. So he starts showing signs of weakening and of not being that warrior for God, that he's slipping away from the faith. It makes perfect sense from what I grew up with, that that's exactly what they would do. And it was absolute. It was thorough. It was complete. He was reprobate, and they weren't going to have him running that organization anymore. He had created this monster, and it had turned on him, right?
It's funny that I don't know if he didn't see that coming, or I can't imagine him mellowing, because he was so aggressive and maybe repressed.
I think that my father did what he did deliberately. He thought he was doing the right thing. My father had a very positive, normal childhood. His mother died of cancer, I think, when he was 5 years old. So some people point to that as maybe a pivotal point in the development of his emotional self. But he was a bright student, got straight A's. He was an Eagle Scout that did it all. He ended up at the age of 17 graduating. He was the class valedictorian. He showed tendencies towards this get in your face, kick them in the knee, and watch how they react kind of approach to other humans, right?
Well, he went on to do some pretty horrible things. Let me ask you this. I noticed as I get older that I see more and more of my own parents' characteristics and idiosyncrasies in my own personality, ones that are wanted and ones that are perhaps not. Do you feel any part of your father in you, or is there nothing like that?
That's a good question. That's really insightful. Far too much. I fret about that. I establish my sometimes too rigid boundaries as far as my behavior, because I'll see something in me that reminds me of something that I despised in him. I'll move heaven and earth to avoid giving it voice or giving it breath. His tendency to go to violence, we grew up with that. And so we understood as children that that was the way the world was. We're not good at separating out and critically analyzing what's going on around us until we, get up to 8, 10 years old, right? So we just take this in, and this is the way the world is. This is, if he behaves this way, we behave this way. So there was a lot of that. It was a very violent, it wasn't just coming from my father. We defaulted to violent behavior. So you come out into the real world, whether or not you are predisposed that direction, you're still going to give it attention. In a frustrating moment, I would give myself permission to behave that way. And then you get to live the real world consequences where you don't control everybody. And then one day it dawns on you, no, I don't have permission to be physically violent towards other humans. It's not okay.
Was there any real moments where something blew up like that?
I haven't talked about it a lot, but there was an inclination when I first left home to lash out at gay people. Because again, that's what we grew up with. It's an easy target because God hates them, right?
So what sort of thing would happen? Would you be walking down the street and maybe see someone who was openly exhibiting homosexual behavior?
Well, no, it was actually a little bit more deliberate and aggressive on my part. I was spending time with friends who were, we were in our late teens, early 20s. I had run away from home. And there was a place in Kansas City called Liberty Circle at a big park there.
Yeah.
And it was a well-known place to hang out. So we'd go up there and just harass them. And if it turned into a bit of violence, so be it, right? Again, I gave myself permission. It was okay. This was something I understood was bad. So I had a right to behave that way. So you grow up with a lot of really stupid ideas about what's okay and what's not okay as far as how you treat other humans.
It's almost like an experiment of how not to bring up a human child into this world. And yet you're so eloquent, and so is Megan, and so is Shirley. And so these are not a bunch of idiots. These are smart people, really smart people who've got an answer to everything. And so you were brought up well in that sense, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, that's what you got to understand is we were in the pews from the day we were born and brought home from the hospital, and that wasn't an accident. He was adamant about that. No, they're going to be sitting there 6 hours every Sunday, and if one of them acted up because they were hungry or whatever, then they'd get swatted. When he would be up there behind the pulpit, he had us all memorize the books of the Bible in order. When he would call out a verse, then you better get there quick, because if you're the last one still shuffling through the pages to find the verse, then you might get his attention, and as a result get smacked upside the head by someone sitting next to you. He set it up deliberately that way, right? As we got older, he had us even start editorializing what we thought maybe that verse meant or how it tied into some doctrine or other. A lot of folks can't defend their beliefs, but we grew up, by God, we better be able to defend our beliefs, right? So that's what you see out there on those picket lines. You may disagree with how they're interpreting a passage or interpreting an idea that exists in the Bible, but by God, they'll be able to defend it.
Were you good at defending it?
It's funny because when I'm talking with people on Twitter or on social media, they'll put up a verse or they'll pose a question about, why did God do this, or why is it this way? And I can come back in an instant with an explanation from the Calvinist point of view.
So can we try it?
Okay.
Okay. So why would God, if he made us in his image, why would he make us gay?
Well, the broad stroke, if you don't have anything immediately to respond to, you say, you have no business asking questions about why God does what he does. He's almighty. He's omnipotent. He's omniscient. He exists in all places, in all times.
Okay.
He understands what's going on a lot better than you do.
Then why do we need you guys?
The Bible says to cry out with a loud voice. See, they're very simple answers. They're basically saying, God tells us this is what we're supposed to do. It doesn't need to make sense to you, you puny human.
Would you know that? Do you know the Bible off by heart?
The entire Bible, no.
But a lot of
But
stuff.
I know the books of the Bible, and I can still spout them in less than 20 seconds. I can do that.
Wow.
What if your daughter disappeared? Your mother, your son? What if years have passed and you're no closer to finding them?
When a person goes missing, their story doesn't stop there.
Each week, Missing brings you stories of missing persons and justice, sourced from the case file of the nonprofit Private Investigations for the Missing.
Listeners Say Missing is the most binge-worthy podcast of all time.
Search Missing wherever you listen to podcasts.
Missing, where mysteries have a mission.
21-year-old UMass student Maura Murray disappeared after crashing her car on a hairpin turn in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. This is the mystery that sparked a cultural obsession.
Missing Maura Murray is the definitive podcast on the case.
Dig deep with hosts Tim Polari and Lance Reen-Sierna as they parse fact from conspiracy and fight to gain closure.
Search Missing Maura Murray wherever you listen to podcasts.
And be warned, you too may become obsessed.
The following is a collect call from a person presumed nice until proven naughty.
Santa Claus is locked up, and I'm going to get him out. My name's Richie Buck. I'm an amateur podcaster and investigator. If you like true crime, feelings of the holidays, and I ain't just talking about Christmas, and satire, well, Santa may be a criminal, just might be for you. Listen and subscribe now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Ho, ho. I get it, man. I mean, I grew up in a Jewish family, nothing compared to what you're talking about. But on Sundays, I had to go and learn to read Hebrew. And a lot of it stays with you, you know, a lot of that stuff. But I do remember being 13 or 14, and I was sitting in a synagogue. I was whispering or something, and somebody turned around and shushed me and said, like, have some respect, the rabbi's talking. And that was my moment of, I felt like I don't want to give him respect. He's talking complete gibberish, and he's welcome to do that as much as he wants. But why am I here being forced to come here on a Sunday and I've got to listen to him? And why are we giving him respect?
Because that's really all there is. If you can't develop the facade around religious ideas, then you got nothing.
Yeah. Are you an atheist now?
Yes, sir.
I've seen you are an advocate of LGBT rights.
Yes, sir.
Is that like your albatross around your neck? Is that your...
No, it's just one of those things where I grew up with a certain idea. Spent a short period of time being aggressively anti-gay, destructively anti-gay. Hopefully didn't do too much harm during that time. I don't recall ever actually hurting anybody beyond throwing maybe a soda at them. It wasn't until I started speaking out against my family and getting contacts from literally thousands of gay people, thousands of people who grew up in environments similar to mine as far as religious beliefs. There were people who were suffering. And hearing all these people talk and getting their stories, it just occurred to me that because of the circumstances of what the Westboro Baptist Church was doing, it was just a natural fit for me to counter their arguments about homosexuality.
When did you accept gays? Was there a moment, or was it a gradual process?
Yeah, it's always gradual. And the truth of the matter is I have to go back to when I was in Southern California, living in Orange County there. California went through, I think, at least 3 different votes in trying to decide whether they were going to allow gay marriage there. And even then, I was advocating for it, not standing on the streets with signs, but was already advocating that, you know, we really don't have any real rational justification. This was long before I became atheist, at least publicly. So the ideas were already formed there, because when it comes down to, if you just give it rational thought, rational inquiry, let go of the Bible for a minute, set that over there. Let's just let it sit. We know what it says. Now let's just go out there and see what evidence we have exclusive of the Bible. There's absolutely no justification for treating this particular group of people different than the rest. It's just what's in us. It's our fear, it's our anxiety, and then it gets codified in some religious book, and suddenly we have justification for treating people bad.
Yeah.
So,
there seems to be an obsession with sodomy.
right. I don't know what that is, man. And then they just don't quite know what to say about the women, right? Because there's
that latest documentary, when Louis went back the third time, it looked very different, and it looked like it had turned into sort of a boys' club. Maybe not as interesting as they once were. And I think Louis picked up on this as well, that they now seem just like any other cult. They didn't have the same wit as your father had, and Shirley, who's been pushed to the side. And it's now just sort of these men lording it over the women, and that's all it really is.
Well, I don't know if you've come across this yet, but that's what caused Megan and Grace to leave. Because they grew up around their mother. She was their mother. She was their hero in many ways, right? And yes, in fact, she was, except maybe my father's charismatic aspect. Yeah. She was the reason that place was so successful. That campaign was so successful. She worked tirelessly. She was intelligent, like you said. She was sharp. Yeah. She was so smart. She was Fred Jr. in that regard, right? And then when the old man started losing his grip, there was a power struggle. There was a power vacuum. And so they voted 8 men in as a deaconship. They became the power. And in that process, they slapped Shirley down. He said, you're in violation of, the passages in Timothy that say, I suffer not a woman to speak. So sit down and shut up, or you're going to be kicked out of the church.
That's a terrible PR move, because frankly, nobody really wants to watch Steve drain. And I think people were fixated on your sister.
Yeah. But they're, that's not going to be an argument for them. I think that they thought the PR would be there just because of who they were, no matter what. And you're right. It bit them in the backside.
There was a great extract online, which was beautifully written, about the moment that you left at midnight on your 18th birthday. Would you be able to talk me through that?
Okay, so you got to go back a few years. My older brother, Mark, had left. Like I said, it was such a controlled, tight, closed system. And our father was telling us very early on that this is what we're going to do. We're going to finish high school. We're going to go to Washburn University. Finish Washburn University. We're going to go to Washburn Law School. And then we're going to roll into Phelps Chartered, which was the law firm that he had, right? Yeah. And that's just the way it was going to be. Nobody really spent a lot of time challenging that, because who are you going to challenge? There was the extreme physical violence, which was how he enforced all of these rules. But then as the kids grew up and, got into their late teens, they kind of got a mind of their own. So first of all, Fred Jr., he takes off. So each kid in turn, as they come of age, they're filling their oats. Well, the old man has to clamp down hard and fast, or else this is going to turn into outright revolt, So he threatens Fred Jr. at one point, even with a gun.
Jesus.
And then Fred disappears for a couple of semesters. He's discovered up at Kansas State University. Meanwhile, the girlfriend who the fight was all over ends up committing suicide.
Oh, my word.
And so Fred's up at Kansas State licking his wounds and trying to figure out where he's going to go. And he's taking classes, and he meets Betty. He finally is convinced, because Betty's a good church girl. So he thinks, okay, now this one he'll accept. So he finally comes back, and the old man does accept her, grudgingly at first. But she's a good Christian girl. She's going to need some adjustments, but she'll work out. And then Mark, the next one in line, because his grades are slipping, and that you don't let that happen.
Right. Oh.
There's violence to pay if you're
what would he do if he saw, so you come home and you've got a bad grade?
That happened once with myself and my younger brother, John, and we ended up in a police station the next afternoon, and they're taking pictures of our backside, black and blue from the bottom of our back all the way down to behind our knees. And they brought charges against the old man for that, but they ended up dropping him, because that was the nature of things back in those years. That would have been in the early 70s, right?
Yeah.
So Mark decides that he can't stay. And he runs away. The old man tracks him down, forces him back home. As they get home, there's a legal client waiting at the door, because his law office was also in that same building. So as my old man's distracted with the legal client, Mark walks through the office, through the church, and back out the back door and disappears. And he managed to stay gone. So that was the first time I actually entertained the idea that maybe there's a way out. I was 16 at the time, and I knew the old man's position was that he owned us until we were 18. So I just kept it close to the chest. And as 17 and a half rolled around, I bought an old car from the security cop at the high school. There's an old Rambler Classic, kept parked down the road so nobody knew I had it. I'd move it every once in a while so it didn't get towed.
Yeah.
And then when no one was looking, I slowly started packing what little belongings I had. And on the night of my 18th birthday, acted like I went to bed, 10:30-ish or so. Everything was quiet and everybody was asleep. I snuck outside, ran down and got the car, backed it into the driveway, and then rolled up the garage door and loaded up all the stuff into the back end. A few days before, I was friends with a guy who owned a gas station that was just adjacent to the high school that I went to, and told him what I was planning. And he said, look, you can stay in the bathroom, but because of the way the place is set up, the entire front of the building is glass. The bathroom is, when you open the door of the bathroom, you come right out into that open area. So you basically have to stay in the bathroom, lights off, until I get here in the morning, right? Because if someone sees you wandering around there, then they're going to think that there's a crime going on, and it'll be a mess. So I go back in the house and I slip into the dining room, which was the stairs going up to my father's room kind of intruded right into the dining room space of the house. And I stood there and watched the clock rise up till midnight. And as soon as it hit midnight, I pumped my fist, let out a yell, and headed out the back door.
Your heart must have been going at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was terrifying, but there was a way out. See, that was the whole thing for me, is I can escape now. I don't have to worry about any kind of repercussions for that. Boy, was I naive. It doesn't take you long to realize you can't really run away from that stuff, right? Because it's all in your head. It was the constant anxiety that either someone was going to show up and figure out a way to force me back into that situation, or God was going to have his revenge, because that was one of the things we understood would happen. If you left, God was going to punish you. He was going to make sure that you got back here. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why everybody else ended up going back, or most everybody else did, because something bad in the environment would happen in our world. Right. That meant God was pissed.
They attributed it to an act of God.
Yes. So, I lived for a time for about a year with my sister Margie.
Okay.
And something bad happened, and she ended up going back home, and she never left again. So something bad happened. I think it was with a man, and that was God punishing her. So back she went.
It never leaves you.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Gain new insight and manage it differently, right?
Yeah, that's all you can do, I suppose. That goes back to what I was saying before about you realize you inherit your parents' attributes, and I guess you can't really change it. I think you wind yourself up too much. So you just go, okay, that's okay, and I'm just aware of it.
Yeah, but you can change how you behave, even if you do have that character in you. You can change how you behave, and that's where my focus was, right?
Yeah, and it seems like you've succeeded.
Yeah, but it's not an all win, all lose situation, right? I mean, there's scars, there's destructive behavior that, and see, here's where it's most frustrating, is you don't know what's you and what's the stuff that was implanted in you, right? So ultimately, you just have to take responsibility for all of it, as far as how you behave, and try to carry on.
I think you could be very proud. I mean, you came from one of the most notorious sects in the world. You could have just escaped and lived your life as it was, but you're going out there and fighting for LGBT rights and everything. So I think that's something you could be immensely proud of.
Yeah.
Do you remember your father in any way fondly?
No. I mean, there were a couple of times when I was a young child. Like, I remember I had to go to the hospital for something. I don't know what it was. And when I got home from the hospital, he put me up on his bed. I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and I got to lay in his bed for some period of time while they were feeding me ice cream. So I'm assuming it was maybe tonsils or something. And then there was another time that we were out on the edge of town, and he had stopped at a junkyard, and they had one of these old, like, I don't even know what you'd call it. It was a curved roof building, metal building.
Okay, I think I know what you mean.
And I'm sitting outside in the car waiting, and it's freezing outside. And at some point in that process, he came out, got me out of the car, and walked me into that dark, oily smelling building and set me beside the fire they had burning in a can. And those are two of the positive experiences where I felt like, he was conscious of my needs and acted on them. But that's pretty sparse.
If you could say something to him now, what would you say?
Here's the thing. It's like when he passed, just like my mom passed just a few months ago, there's an expectation that there's going to be those emotions because most folks are normal, right?
Yeah.
They lose a loved one, and there's emotions. But what folks don't understand is in the process of separating yourself and of protecting yourself after you're cut off from everything that you grew up with and everything that you know. I remember actually I was in counseling at the time, and the counselor suggested that I actually write my goodbyes as though they died.
Okay.
And I went through that process. It was just, to me, it was just following the instructions of the counselor. But, looking back in retrospect, that was me mourning the loss of my family. By the time he passed, and by the time my mom passed, the only thing left is sadness over what might have been. Well, that opportunity's gone.
But you have your own family now.
I have 3 biological. I raised my stepdaughter from the age of 3.
Oh.
They didn't know about it. Interestingly enough, it wasn't until they were adults. I just didn't think it was right to put that on them. And they're adults now, they have the capacity to reason. And if they come across stuff and they want to talk about it, I'll talk to them about it. But
how did your experience with your father, how has that changed you as a father?
Well, they say we either become them or we become the opposite of them.
Yeah.
I made it my mission to be the opposite of him. So that would be one huge way that it impacted it. One of his philosophies was to isolate us, to keep us away from the evil world. So my philosophy was that I was going to see to it that my kids were wholly immersed in the society that they were growing up in, right?
Okay.
And as a result, I actually ended up joining a church when they were young because I thought that was a necessary part of them feeling like they were normal.
Are you a good father?
Hope so.
Thanks for listening to my first ever episode, and I hope it made a bit of an impression on you, at least. I found it incredibly sad listening to Nate describe his childhood and how the only positive memories he could recall were a particularly bad illness and attending a garage one time. Yet, there is a positive side to all of this, as he broke out of the church and seems to have led a fulfilling life and helped many, many other people with his kindness and openness and LGBT activism. Find him on N8Phelps on Twitter, and you'll find a little video trailer of this episode on my own social media channel, AndrewGold_OK. It's the same on Instagram and Twitter, AndrewGold_OK. If you did enjoy that and are keen for more, please remember to subscribe on your podcast platform. And if you happen to be using Apple, go leave a review. I really like to hear things like where you are listening to this and any personal connections you have to the story, anything funny that happened in your day, so I can read it out on future episodes. You'll also find my blog on andrewgoldpodcast.com, which has little video teasers again from every episode so far. If you enjoyed this one, you should enjoy the ones with the ex-Hasidic Jew, Emily, and the ex-Muslim, Ray. I'll leave you for now, but do stay in touch. I love creating a bit of a community, and I'll see you next time. Welcome to my second ever podcast, which is double the number of my first one last week. If you missed that, do go back and listen. It was an absolute belter with Nate Phelps, defector of the Westboro Baptist Church. But now, on to the future, and I hope I don't sound too much like a sycophant when I tell you how excited I am to introduce my chat with Zoltan Istvan. Zoltan is frankly one of the most interesting people in the world. He believes very strongly that we can and will achieve immortality, far sooner than many of us may think. While some people, who Zoltan calls deathists, find the idea of living forever abhorrent, many of us see it as our saving grace. The very idea has sparked thousands of years of religious practices, traditions, and war. Essentially, we don't want to die. And former National Geographic correspondent Zoltan is at the forefront of that movement. Like a futuristic evangelist, he tours the US in the so-called immortality bus, shaped like a coffin, promoting the concept that death is merely a disease waiting to be cured. He opens doors with a chip in his hand, has written sci-fi novels, and is currently making a documentary about the immortality industry. In our chat, he tells me about how he just ran for president, how he believes we can bring people back from the dead through something called quantum archaeology, and tells me what inspired him to want to live forever. He's great company and full of enthusiasm, so I hope by the end of this episode, you'll also want him to stick around. Am I right in saying you're running as a presidential candidate?
So I'm not running for anything anymore. The presidential candidacy for the Republican Party ended, and then I just made a very short run for the vice presidential candidacy of the Libertarian Party, which I've run for before. But now everything's over. I didn't get far in anything. Although the presidential campaign was pretty effective. We got 6th overall in the Republican race.
Did you expect to make any headway with that? Was it a realistic goal?
Well, no, it was not realistic in the sense that I would actually beat Trump, for the nomination of the Republican Party to win the U.S. presidency. But it's realistic in the sense that I'm kind of one of the, leaders of the transhumanist movement. I'm bringing transhumanism, science and technology ideas to the Republican Party, which is known for not being very science-oriented. And was that effective? Yeah, we made national news, quite a bit. And we were on a ton of state ballots, so we got, a lot of votes. And the word traveled that, hey, there's a Republican candidate who's running under a science and technology platform. And people think about it. People think about the future that way. With Trump, They just think about whatever Trump says. But, in my candidacy, I think about different things. So was it effective that way? Yeah, 30 million people probably heard about the campaign, and that was effective in that sense.
Yeah, so in that sense, it was a success, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I would say it was definitely a success. We were hoping for an explosion of popularity, but that never happened. But at the same time, we can't complain because our team and I did really well in terms of just getting the message in front of people. And I might have a shot at the presidency or a major elected office in 12 years, 16 years. And the goal is you work up to that. And one day it might be that my moment comes and I've been around long enough putting my time in.
Yeah, I suppose he's 70 something, isn't he? So you've got a good 30 years.
And actually, when you look at a lot of politicians that have ended up making it, they often have lost, 4 or 5 times before. So, it's very typical to lose campaigns and then one day win.
Did you ever see that documentary, Gringo, about the guy who did McAfee's?
Yeah, I have seen Gringo, yeah. And I know John McAfee too, so yeah.
Wow, yeah, he was a strange guy.
Yeah, he's wild. He was, he's running for various offices all the time as well and doing his cryptocurrency thing. But yeah, you never know.
If you if you were president, what ideas would you implement? Just a very basic, summary.
Well, I think, the very first thing we would do on day one is try to declare aging a disease. And the reason is that most transhumanists, and for your listeners who don't know, transhumanism is a field that wants to use science and technology to modify the human being and also to modify the human experience. And that means anything from exoskeleton suits to brain implants to even things as simple as driverless cars. But it's always radical technology. But mostly, the number one goal of transhumanism, at least to me and to many others, is that we want to overcome biological death with science and technology. And ultimately, aging is really why most people die, the organ failure through aging. And so we would like to declare it a disease for the United States government. And therefore, the National Institute of Health would be able to legally put in billions of dollars of funding to overcome that, right now, we don't treat aging as a disease anywhere essentially in the world. We treat it as just like a natural phenomenon of life. But if you actually targeted the research, the medical stuff, the science to go after aging and stop it, which of course a lot of private companies are already doing, a huge amount of new funding would flow in. And the reason you make breakthroughs in transhumanism is because of funding. So if you have the money, you will find a cure to death. You will find ways to modify the human being. Everything is possible with enough funding and science.
It's a very capitalistic idea, isn't it? I guess this idea that with the technology, if we build it and then we make money through different ways, and then we can solve each problem as it comes to us. Do you see it actually happening? I guess will it be a sudden realization, or is this a very gradual thing? Sort of getting immortality.
Well, I think a lot of people think, one day someone invents something and you have immortality. It's not like that. Immortality is much more. We'll probably come to a point when we could keep maybe 60 or 70% of the people alive for an extra 10 or 20 years. And in that 10 or 20 years, we'll figure out other ways to keep people alive. People die because of organ failure. The number one killer in the world is heart disease. So if you can effectively replace the heart with, let's say, a bionic heart, which people are trying to do, then you could take away that disease from why people die. And eventually, though, the holy grail of transhumanism is really reversing aging. And we've had some success with mice and regenerating cells and things like that. But there's a lot of people that are hoping one day in 10, 20, 30 years, we'll have a pill on the market or some kind of gene therapies, which people are already trying, to literally change your genes so that they don't age, or they make it so cells don't age. And that's really where the holy grail is. But in the meantime, Silicon Valley is really focusing on 3D printed organs and stem cell therapies that rejuvenate things that damage caused and stuff like that to keep people alive longer. And we're having success with that. But, it's not an overnight thing. People are living longer than ever before if they don't have obesity issues. But the problem, though, is that it's to really get to the next hurdle, to go from 100 to an average of 120 is going to be a lot. It's going to take a lot more than just helping organs out. It's going to take replacing organs.
Oh my God. I hope you're right about this, man. I mean, I would vote for you because I remember it's so funny, this world we grow up in, because we don't really, as children, we don't question this. And then you get to an age, I think a lot of people get this when they're 13 or 14 or 18 or 19 or whatever it might be, where you suddenly realize, oh wow, there's just an infinite void. It's a happy topic for the podcast. Did you have a moment like that got you into this?
Well, my main moment is I used to be a journalist for National Geographic, and I was covering a story in Vietnam where I almost stepped on a landmine because I was working a story in the demilitarized zone. And the landmine incident really just kind of got my brain thinking like, wow, I could have died. I'm young. That is not, that's just not smart. And, but more importantly, it's not just smart. It's what can you do if you'd actually had half your body blown off? And then, it got me thinking, is there some people out there that are working on really removing existential risk from human life? And it turns out transhumanism has been around for 10, 20, 30 years, and it's growing tremendously now, especially in Silicon Valley where I live. I mean, a lot of the billionaires are starting to put a lot of their money into focusing on anti-aging therapies and living a lot longer because they also don't want to die. When some kind of movement like that happens and then the popular culture starts joining, like the New York Times is starting to let me write quite a bit about transhumanism, all of a sudden it's like we're coming sort of like transhumanism is almost like the environmental movement. 25, 30 years ago, nobody thought cutting down a tree, or very few people thought cutting down a tree was a big deal, or not recycling was bad. Now it's like we're all very green. We've been kind of cultured and conditioned to think, protect the planet, as a whole. And transhumanism will be the same way. Probably in 5, 10 years, many people start thinking, I would like a robotic eye, or I would like, maybe not a robotic eye so soon, but they'll start thinking, that could be part of the future. And then when they lose something like an eye, they'll say, hey, this is great. So it's a cultural conditioning as we sort of say, modifying our bodies is acceptable to live better lives. It just becomes functional. So that's where, but if you look at any social movement, there are moments, there are hiccups, there are, breakups or factions but the progress is upward. And we believe we're going to come to a future when more people want to be cyborgs than not.
You know what I think might be one of the biggest stumbling blocks, and you've probably thought about this as well, is that I think we've been, as you say, conditioned to such a point that people, almost like in a religious way, convince themselves they wouldn't want to live forever. And I think, at least a lot of people I've spoken to, friends of mine, they would always say, why would you live forever? And the literature, movies, Harry Potter, for example, the person who wants to live forever is always seen as the selfish, greedy person. And I think we have to tell ourselves that because we know we're going to die. So I guess, do you think it's a little bit about telling people that it's not so selfish or it's not so bad
Yeah, I mean, transhumanists call these people deathists, and frankly, the majority of the world are deathists, meaning people who embrace the culture of death and dying. Now, most of the deathists believe that there is an afterlife, and that's they get to go to this wonderful place with Jesus or Allah or whoever it is. But there are plenty of atheists who also don't want to live forever. So it's not like, it's really just we've been cultured to think that terminal existence is good. But transhumanists don't believe that. They think, first off, the main argument is that, life will be really boring if you live forever. But it might be really boring if you were just a human being, a biological, 6 foot or, I guess in England, 2 meter entity that's just walking around. But that's not our future. Our future is connecting our brains to artificial intelligence, to becoming artificial intelligence, to becoming pure data, pure forms of life, quantum intelligence. The AI age might only last 10 or 15 years before we discover something beyond AI. We span the cosmos with our consciousness. So, and that gets a little weird and a little almost quasi-religious, but that's really what the singularity and some of these far-fetched transhumanist ideas are about. The most important thing to understand, though, is that we're not going to remain biological beings with just like a kilo of meat on our head, which we can think with. We're going to become very different types of living conscious entities. And that's all part of the transhumanist trajectory. So life will be very, very interesting as we grow and evolve into completely new types of beings.
So what's a really strange thought for me, because I've heard you talk about mind uploading before. And I guess it's this feeling, I remember reading something when I was about 11 years old, some philosophy book for kids or something. And it was this idea of like, if there was such a thing as a transporter you walk into it and it transports you and then you're on Mars and you go and work in the mines in Mars and then you're transported back to the planet Earth. And then they find out later what's happening is they're incinerating the first person and they're producing a clone on Mars. And then every time you come home from Mars, you're incinerating that person and so on. So the second person is not you. And I guess that's how I wonder about mind uploading. Presumably you could copy and paste 100 of these people and none of them might be you.
I tend to think if you have an exact clone of somebody, truly an exact clone, it's impossible to say that it's not you, because the other clone would argue that I am you 100% in the exact same way that you would argue. So in my belief, I think a clone of me is actually another one of me. Now, I realize 2 of us might be like, hey, we're not the same. But within that instant, you actually become something different. But in the beginning, if there's no known clone, then you both feel that you're 100% there. And so at least in my way of thinking, that is a sort of form of immortality. It's not perfect, though. I would like the continuity of my consciousness to go on.
Yeah, that's the issue, the consciousness, isn't it?
That's what it seems like. But, then you have something like sleeping where we all fall asleep and forget, and then we wake up and how do we know that, I did my senior thesis in college on brains in a vat. How can you and I right now prove that we're not just being brains in a vat controlled by some scientists in some other world? There's really no way to philosophically do that. And when we go to sleep and wake up, we don't even know. And then there's also the idea that even our cells change. Some of them die, some of them are renewed. There's there's brand new cells. Our sense of identity, even our sense of thinking is quite different. When you have the flu, you're quite a different person mentally because there's all these other things going on. So the point is, continuity of consciousness may not be as important as just a belief, a really structural philosophical belief that I'm still here, even if I've changed a little. And so I'm a big believer in uploading ourselves as a means of having it. But the problem with uploading is, who's just going to upload one version of themselves? I mean, you give me the thing, I'm going to upload 1,000. I have an army of Zoltans and maybe all different variations. And that's my creation, almost like art. And so, it's not just like, we all like to think on a linear level, like, oh, there's an uploaded version now, that's how I get to go. But the reality is we might become millions of us very, very quickly, like any virus would. And so we have to think outside of the box when we think about things like mind uploading, just because philosophically it's not a linear process. It's going to be something much more of exponential conscious creation.
Because which of those 1,000 Zoltans that you've uploaded has your consciousness?
Well, I mean, you know, which of the Zoltans that wakes up in the morning also has my consciousness from the one last night? You know, I've been altered because of dreams or my biology has changed. So, you know, I mean, the one that I've uploaded has 100% the same DNA, and except for maybe 3 or 4 minutes from the point it wakes up and maybe has some different thoughts, would be identical to me. It's probably more identical than actually a person who goes to sleep, sleeps 6 hours and wakes up, because we're always constantly changing. I mean, I'm going to be a changed person in very minute ways from this conversation. And the same thing is, if I had a clone this second, it would take about 5 seconds for that clone to be a little bit changed. The point I'm trying to make is that it's not a perfect world. It's not perfect continuity of consciousness, but it's quite close. Yeah. And for some of us who don't require perfection, it's going to be good enough for me to know that I have a mind uploaded clone out there. And I would say, well, at least Zoltan continues in some sense. And for me, it's a very significant sense. It's not as good as, let's say, I get to go through the door, but you know, it's very close for me.
Yeah.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And together we host a weekly true crime podcast called The Prosecutors.
In every episode, we bring our unique perspective as full-time prosecutors to the most famous and debated true crime mysteries. Whether it's Maura Murray, Scott Peterson, or the Delphi murders, Brett and I dig deep to bring you details you won't hear anywhere else.
Our podcast is about more than just a story. We will walk you through the legal problems lurking behind every case, breaking down the complexities of the criminal justice system with humor and a personal touch. And it's not just true crime. We bring the same training and approach we've learned as prosecutors to classic mysteries like the Dyatlov Pass incident and the ghost ship Mary Celeste.
So if you're looking for a true crime podcast with a different point of view, The Prosecutors is the one for you. Find us wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you fascinated by unexplainable crimes, conspiracies, and fringe culture? Well, step into the crawl space. From tales of survival and deepfakes to synchronicities and cryptozoology, Crawl Space is a podcast that brings you weekly stories of the mysterious, harrowing, and bizarre. Search Crawl Space wherever you listen to podcasts. Crawl Space, where crime meets culture.
I've got an awesome true crime podcast I need to tell you about called Crawl Space, which is a show I love. Yes, I realize everyone recommends podcasts, but you're listening to me, and I'm telling you should be listening to Crawl Space too. Can't argue with that logic. The show covers a wide range of topics from unexplainable crimes to conspiracies and fringe culture, with weekly interviews with expert guests. And there are a ton of episodes you'll find interesting since you're a fan of this show. I'd recommend our listeners check out their recent episode about the real-life Frankenstein, or their interview with Catherine Jones, who is incarcerated at 13 years old. Also, I was on their podcast twice, so maybe start with those episodes. You'll like those. There's an episode for every true crime addict, though, no matter what you're into. The show covers stories of survival and deep fakes to synchronicities and cryptozoology. Tim, Lance, and Jenna, your weekly dose of the mysterious, harrowing, and bizarre. You can't go wrong with adding Crawl Space to your rotation. Just search for Crawl Space, True Crime and Mysteries on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You're blowing my mind, Zoltan. It's really, because I've wanted this. I need an answer since, in the same way that people look to religion for an answer, I've needed, to me that just never held water. So I need some sort of answer. How long would you like to live for? Is there a number?
I would probably want to live indefinitely, because I think the miracle of life is quite amazing, and I'm generally happy, and I like to explore, and I know I'm evolving, and technology is helping us to life. And for me, it's an infinite amount of life years. Nobody would want to live perpetually in a state of complete total tragedy or total pain. And so, you know, there are limits to how I would want to, but if I'm kind of who I am now, I would like to go on forever.
Have you given any thought, or is it just so far away to, you know, I suppose in 100 million years, I think we'll go back into some sort of glacial period, and in a billion years, the sun will engulf, or is it 8 billion, the Earth, and that kind of thing? Or is that just so far, and you'll be 8 billion years old by then?
Well, I mean, I think really the majority of history happens in the next 100 to 200 years. As the microprocessor has, through Moore's law, and even if Moore's law is not perfect, it's still doubling every 18 months, 24 months. If that continues, then, you start getting to points here just 20, 30 years in the future when, the size of your fingernail contains all the subatomic particle configurations of the entire, this galaxy, for example. And you have processing power that can make sense of it. And we have things like quantum archaeology, which is a very funny, so your listeners know that quantum archaeology is this branch of transhumanism, sort of on the fringe, where people want to resurrect the dead. And you resurrect the dead through reverse engineering parts of the universe, because we believe that most subatomic particles are mathematical. So therefore you can reverse it like you would reverse anything else. And then through 3D printing, which is already here, we can already 3D print out, let's say, a finger or an ear, but certainly within 20, 30 years, we'll be able to 3D print out an entire human being. So through those two technologies, you reverse engineer parts of your world, and you get back to 50 years ago when, let's say, your great-grandfather died, and then you 3D print him out. This is, no one's sure this works. Sure. But there are dedicated groups of transhumanists that have made it their point in life to try to resurrect every single person who has ever lived. This is not DNA. This is going back through quarks and subatomic particles, reverse engineering how the universe has gone through time, and figuring out what they look like, and then pressing the print button. But the reason I mentioned this is that this is probably, the technology for this will likely be here within 100 years' time, and probably by the end of the century. So we're talking about a situation beyond just connecting our brains to AI, and beyond just the idea of like even becoming different cyborg beings, of bringing back anyone and everything who has ever lived. Like I said, there are people that believe the true humanitarian job is not just to save people's lives now, but to bring them back. We'll have this technology. How we decide to use it, if we decide to use it, people in their will are very soon going to have to say either resurrect me or do not resurrect me, because there will be this possibility in the future to do this kind of thing. And so you'll have to ask yourself, like my father died a few years ago, did he want to come back? If he brought back, maybe my mom's remarried, all these, it gets very confusing very quickly. This is the power of technology. It's the power of transhumanism. It's not always good or bad or anything like that. It's more neutral, but the reality is it's going to challenge us to the core of our philosophical belief, because we have things like Pascal's wager, where some people think it's best to believe in God just because not believing God doesn't help you, but believing in God at least might lead you to heaven. But what about believing in technology? That might bring you back too. So we have this transhumanist wager. The point, though, is that transhumanist technology is making everything very confusing, and it's all coming. And the technology is going to be here. It's already here to some extent. I mean, you and I are on this, even 20, 30 years ago, this thing where you are doing now would seem crazy. And 100 years ago, this would be magic. We might have been burned at the stake for what we're doing here on Zoom. Technology changes.
Have you thought about who you would bring back from history?
I would bring back Jesus Christ, because I'm a secular person who has been fighting religion a lot of my life, because I think religion has sort of slowed down progress. It has slowed down the ability to bring back, to move forward with science. And so it's very important for me to bring back the most important historical figure and ask him, are you really the Son of God? And can you do these miracles? And I know this upsets a lot of people, but if Christians really believe that Jesus is the Son of God and can do all these things, and, they might want to bring him back because, he would be here to help humanity. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. But
you'd have to show he's a real person, was ever a real person, though.
Of course you would, and that, that gets a little bit nitty gritty. But the point, though, is that I often say it's him, because he is the most, well-known figure in history. And I think one of the goals I've had for a long time is to make people less fundamental about religion and more open-minded about spirituality that can come from using science and technology. Maybe God does exist. I mean, I don't believe that right now, but if he does or she does exist, or whatever it is, I think technology and science can help us get there a lot more quickly. And this is the kind of radical thinking that you think, okay, well, that's the very first person I'd bring back.
Do you think you face a little bit more backlash, and you have to sometimes give a little bit in terms of using words like spirituality in the States, because it is quite religious?
Well, I mean, it's crazy religious, and Trump's only making it worse. You go to Europe, and all of a sudden, everyone seems rational and sensible.
Well,
but
not
you come
all of
to
us.
America, especially in the middle of the country, the Bible Belt area, and the thing I just said about 3D printing Jesus out, this is taken the wrong way. This would be very, people get very upset, and you'd have riots. So you have to. People in America are definitely, I think, not as with it when it comes to thinking philosophically outside the box. Our educational system is just not as good as Europe, and people show it all across the country all the time. I know, a lot of people didn't realize that maybe in the last 10, 20 years. They've been realizing it a lot in the last 4 or 5 years in America.
It's very frustrating, actually, for someone like me, because I want to see your movement succeed. And I look at America, and you have some of the leading thinkers in the world, and also you have this Bible Belt side of it. So it's just such an extreme side, and it feels like one side is holding the other one back, depending on your perspective, which one is which.
Well, it is. So, the main goal of transhumanism is to try to use science and technology to overcome biological death. But that requires Congress to pass money and bills so that it can do it. But the problem here is we have 535 members of Congress. Every single one of them in public says they believe in an afterlife. We have 9 Supreme Court justices who make all the laws. Every single one of them believes in an afterlife, they say. And the same thing with the president and the vice president. So our entire government, everyone that's of importance, says that they believe in afterlife. So therefore, they don't want to spend the money on anti-aging technologies. They want to spend the money on spreading their, wars or whatever crazy stuff they do all over the country.
Yeah.
We could probably conquer death within 10 years if the government would take all the military and defense budget, or at least half it, and put it directly towards science. We would change the world's science programs just because so much money would flow in. But they're not going to do that because it doesn't fit their religious agenda. Almost anyone who controls the purse strings believes that they should die and that dying is a good thing so that they can meet their maker. This has been the biggest crux and the biggest issue essentially in transhumanism. We can't get enough money to fund the kind of science projects that we need. It all has to come from the private environment. And there's just not enough money in the private world because a lot of the great inventions have come through government funding because they're willing to take chances.
Have you tried to get Elon Musk on board?
We have. Elon Musk is kind of has stayed sort of outside of the indefinite lifespan thing, maybe even almost against it. But, everyone else has been very much on board. I mean, even Mark Zuckerberg recently gave $3 billion with the quote to end all disease by the end of the century. That's the same thing as saying I live a lot longer. Peter Thiel, doesn't even matter if you're right or left. There's quite a few new billionaires. So just to give your listeners a feeling, about 6 years ago, the amount of funding in longevity industry was $1 billion. Yeah. And now Bank of America is saying by 2025, it's going to be 600 billion. So it's astronomical kind of the amount of funding that's going in to life extension. Of course, coronavirus has stopped like 200,000 experiments around the world, but hopefully most of them will catch up again. But we will get back, I think, eventually, and we'll find a path forward for humanity to live indefinitely. And then I think many of the religious people will quietly say, "Oh, well, we can still live forever and believe in God," which makes that's a much more sensible approach to it.
Yeah. Do you worry that you might miss it?
I will probably miss it. It's crazy. I got to tell you, the coronavirus, the sheer lockdown has probably stopped 3 to 5 years of science progress in America. Maybe not so much now. Maybe the economy is a little bit better than I thought. But no matter how you look at it, it stopped at least 18 months, probably 2 years, 3 years. When you look, if we solve aging by, let's say, the year 2030 versus 2050, we will be able to save 1 billion lives. 1 billion. So every single year is equivalent to 30, 40, 50 million lives. So if we stop, let's say, by 2045 versus 2047, we're talking 100 million extra lives have been saved because we moved the ball that much closer to the goalpost.
The other thing is, I've heard you say this before, because the main question you get is overpopulation. And you said if it was doubled, we could support that amount on the Earth right now. But presumably within 100 years or 200 years, we'd have more than double the population. It would be a lot more and more and more. So you're talking about saving 1 billion. Each 20 years or so. Isn't there going to come a point where, we've got to move planets or what?
Well, I think you have to understand, if we come to the point where we can actually stop aging, we've come that far in science. That means we have bionic organs. We have the ability to use gene therapies to grow like new arms and new organs. We're going to find new ways to feed ourselves. In fact, feeding, like the 50-year window does no longer involve food. It doesn't involve going to the bathroom. It doesn't involve, it's just like the 50-year window probably doesn't involve fossil fuels for energy production. It probably involves only things that are natural, because we're going to leave this idea that we need to breathe oxygen. I mean, like if you were God and you were to try to create a human being or a living entity, you would never create something that gets hot or cold or needs to breathe oxygen, or needs to eat and hunt. You would create something like, we would create a cyborg, which is a cyborg would have maybe solar panels or fusion energy inside itself, and it can power itself and fix itself all the time. Humans are fragile. And I think that's the main thing that transhumanists believe, is that, well, humans may be great. We might be like this, super entity on planet Earth. If we were to remake ourselves with all the power, hopefully we'll have 30, 40 years, we would not create a world where we're dependent upon oxygen or we're dependent on food. And of course, this means that we could have hundreds of millions more people. And this is how transhumanists also defend this quantum archaeology, because one of the main questions is, well, okay, great. You want to bring back everyone who's ever died. What about overpopulation? But again, we're talking about such radical technologies. We'd already be in a brand new era, hopefully the Star Trek era. And then we started looking at different planets, and maybe people have uploaded themselves, don't even have physical bodies. So as our philosophy, we like to imagine the future as something concrete. We anthropomorphize. We say it's just like it is now. But the reality is, if you take 20, 30 years in the future, we're not going to have the same moral systems. We're not going to have the same philosophical values. Our sense of identity will adjust with the technology, just like our sense of identity has adjusted with privacy and stuff like that, as all of a sudden we all now carry cell phones. We didn't imagine that 40 years ago, but we adjusted with it because that's how things happen. I think the same thing will happen with overpopulation. It's a big issue in my opinion, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But I think the bigger issue is that we actually have to eat. We have to kill all these animals. We have to farm. We have to destroy the planet. We'll get to a point when we can recreate the planet in a very pristine Eden through science and technology. And that's the answer to the environmental issues. I totally believe we're killing the planet, but I also believe we can save it with technology. We just need to get to that point when we have that technology.
Man, I hope so. I guess my biggest concern is that I guess a lot of creativity comes from sort of accident. We've even evolved from accidents and things going wrong and so on, and that's what gives us, the energy to go on. And I guess I worry it might turn out a little bit like in WALL-E, that movie, and we're just sort of fat and sitting there.
Well, look, that is the big challenge, and I can't even tell you that's not going to happen because right now that is happening. I mean, that's why America is almost so obese. I mean, we have an obesity epidemic. I mean, it's terrible, and it's killing people. I mean, even now the COVID-15, everyone's gained 15 pounds since they've been on lockdown. It's true. I mean, people are, myself included. It's hard to keep our same patterns going. But the point is that it's up to us to fix that, and maybe we'll even have a pill or something that can keep us all healthy and skinny forever. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but there's no way to escape laziness at this moment unless we get a brain implant or something. But right now, the WALL-E is a good argument.
What are you going to do today?
I have a few other interviews. I'm doing a little bit of writing and putting together a new book. And we have a new documentary coming out, just so you know, on June 23rd. And it's called Immortality or Bust, 4 years in the making. It won the award at the Raw Science Film Festival in Los Angeles last year. So we're really excited about it. It should be all over because it's coming on a ton of cable channels too. But yeah, you can check that out. Immortality Bust, June 23rd. Please buy the pre-order the iTunes version because we have to get to a certain level in order to get a certain amount of PR from the companies.
Okay, so the iTunes version.
Yeah, it's $12.99. Sorry, but it is worth it. You'll have it, and it's a very fun thing. It's a very sad story. It's me driving my coffin bus across the country as my dad is dying.
Oh,
so
God.
It's a tough. I'm running for president, campaigning against death, and here's my father dying. So it's a tough story. It's gonna maybe make you cry, but it's beautiful in a sense as it shows what the movement's all about. And I go around the country visiting all the different transhumanist groups. There's a ton of factions, so it's very interesting because, like I said, some are off the range, and others are just scientists, and then some are more interested in crime. I mean, we're all over the place, so it covers the entire movement.
It sounds amazing. I think I should ask people as well to follow you on Twitter, Zoltan Istvan. It's quite easy to find you.
Yeah, Zoltan_Istvan.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you found that as interesting as I did. Whether we'll actually be able to live forever, I won't hold my breath. But some of the theories Zoltan came out with absolutely blew my mind. Please do subscribe to this on Spotify. It'll be out on Apple soon, and a video version is available already on my YouTube page. Head to AndrewGold_OK on Twitter for the link. You know the drill. Follow, subscribe, and I'll see you next week when I'll have another person who fascinates me, and hopefully you, on the show.
My wedding day was very stressful, and I was going to be raped that night. I didn't know that at the time, but that's really what it is, because I'm forced to have sex with this man who I actually wasn't attracted to. Actually, we had nothing to say to each other, Andrew. We had nothing. You have to do this. You don't have a choice, because what you're told is that the marriage is only consummated if you have sex.
Hi again, I'm back for the third installment of the Andrew Gold podcast, and today I speak with Emily Green, who grew up in the Hasidic community, an extreme branch of the Orthodox, or Haredi, Jews. She's since set up Gesher EU, a European equivalent of the New York-based Footsteps, an organisation that helps people leave the sect and start a new life. If you're interested, or if you are in such a community and have managed to use a secret computer with internet access, as Emily did herself, make sure to get in touch with her on geshereu.org.uk. That's GESHEREU.org.uk. So you know, next week I've got another riveting guest in the form of Justin Hall, the world's first ever blogger. So you could say he was patient zero in our social influenza. He had a fistfight with Kurt Vonnegut, posted the first ever dick pic, and had an online breakdown after everything spiraled out of control. So do subscribe to the channel to make sure you don't miss it. For now though, Emily tells me what she thought of the Netflix sensation Unorthodox, which portrayed a Hasidic Jew escaping Brooklyn, New York, for Berlin, where I now live. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you do, but don't worry, there are no spoilers and we don't talk about it for too long.
I thought they did a pretty good job, doing it through the Yiddish, and the actors. I think the producers really worked hard to get it really spot on. And they did to a large extent. It was brilliant for me to be able to kind of say to people, like, actually at work, and they were like, oh, we watched Unorthodox, and it's like, right, okay, so this is it. Like, I don't have to explain anymore. It's like, well, it's there, it's out there.
What stood out to you mostly that they've really got spot on?
I think the meeting between Yankee and Esty the first time, the kind of the awkwardness, the atmosphere, the typical kind of conversation was so brilliant. It was accurate. It was like, reliving my own experience.
Yeah.
When I met my husband then for the first time.
Wow.
So in some ways quite therapeutic. Like, okay, it's like a kind of, you at the time I was young, you don't know what's happening. You just go along with it and you feel all these different feelings, and to see it out there, it's like, okay, I'm not crazy. This is real. This is, because it is weird and it's not normal. Yeah. And watching it as on the eyes of a secular person, I can see now how bizarre it is.
I think one of the interesting things for me was that because I'm from a very secular Jewish family as well, but I had a bar mitzvah, I learned to read Hebrew and a few things like that. And I think a lot of people, some friends said to me, is that what your childhood was like? And I had to explain the difference. And I never met anybody in that community, I suppose, because it is so closed off. What is it like for the very, very few people in your situation who have actually been in it? What is it like around the TV room?
My older children remember when I was still living in the community, and seeing it on the TV, it's like, oh my God, what is this? This is weird, But then obviously, they realized what this is, and they got quite interested in it. So yeah, it was a very strange experience.
So did you stop it sometimes and say to your daughters, like, oh my God, this is like this or that? Or were there emotional parts for you, bringing you back to something that I suppose you have mixed memories of?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit strange. Like, I think the intimate scenes where Yankee and Esty have sex, and I think the one with the mikvah, and I think there's a shock, for my, I was like, you did that? Like, it was like, I think a revelation. And it was like, yes. And it was like, wow, okay.
Yeah. For our listeners who don't know, could you explain what a mikvah is?
When a woman has her period, she has to separate from her husband physically. So no physical contact is allowed at all. She has to check twice a day using these cloths, and you have to insert it into your vagina, really awful, to check that you're clean, that you're not bleeding. And then after 7 days, when you have kind of, that evidence that you've not, your period is completely finished, you have to go to this place called the mikvah, which is like a ritual bath. You go in there after dark. You spend about an hour bathing yourself, and then you dip in there. You make a blessing, and then you have this woman the mikvah attendant, who watches you, which is extremely uncomfortable and violating, which I absolutely couldn't stand, and it's absolutely awful. And I think that's something, actually, I'm thinking about it, is not okay, especially for Jewish girls who are raised their whole life to cover their bodies, and then you're suddenly exposed and forced to do this on a monthly basis. It's awful. But the whole thing, they sell it to you as like it's a spiritually cleansing experience. And then once you've done that, you can come home to your husband and you're like pure, and you're kind of like, you're allowed to resume having sex, and you can be intimate with each other.
I suppose it must make you feel ashamed of your body and dirty.
In the rest of your life as women, you're taught to be ashamed in the sense that you always have to cover your body, wearing the wig and the sleeves and you've got to wear those lengths, the necklines and the hemlines and all of it. As you saw Esty when she was still in Brooklyn. And then suddenly you're forced to completely naked in front of this stranger. So it all feels, it's really psychologically and emotionally damaging.
For somebody who's secular and doesn't know anything about that environment, how would you describe your childhood?
When I was 15, I picked up a code of Jewish law in English that was in my parents' house. Now, these kind of laws are only shared with women once, literally a couple of weeks before the wedding. Yeah. You're not told, we're not given sex education. That kind of information is completely taken out. It's considered inappropriate. So I was just reading it as a curious teenager. And then my mum finds me reading it, and she goes completely ballistic with me. She's like furious, like, how dare you be reading this? And I was thinking, well, it's a code of Jewish law. Like, you would think that, at school we studied Jewish law. So happened to be, I was reading those chapters. So what's wrong with that? And then, of course, because it's forbidden, I'm going to continue to read it. And when I'm reading, I'm thinking, oh my God, no. This is something they did 100 years ago. Like, really? Like, you're starting to think, like, so my mum does this? Yeah. Other than that, growing up, you're like any kid, you just accept things that are normal. Like, this is how we dress. You're also taught how proud and how amazing it is to be, we're the chosen nation and God loves you and all that. So a lot of that kind of, and you believe in it. So I think that was okay. Like, I never questioned anything, I think, till I was about 18 or 19, when I came close to having an arranged marriage. I think that's when it kind of started to kind of...
Yeah, when you said that your mother caught you reading and said, don't read, and it made you want to read more, I suppose you had a rebellious streak. Would that be fair?
I suppose, without realizing. I didn't consider myself rebellious then, but maybe just curiosity. Looking back now, I know that there was lots of things I was deprived of, like not watching TV, or not lots of books. I couldn't go to the library. Lots of literature out there that, like, I'm an English teacher now, and I do loads of literature, and to think that I've missed out on a whole childhood of not reading. But, again, you don't know what you're missing, really.
Is there a sense from some of the children, are they seeing other children who are allowed to play certain games or read books, as you say? Is there any sort of, why don't we get to do some of that?
Not really. There's not for me. I mean, some people might grow up thinking that, but you don't really think about it too much. And what you're kind of brainwashed to believe that your life is kind of like, we're special, we're better than everyone else, and you're privileged to be living this lifestyle, and how lucky we are. So you do kind of buy that as a child, and because everybody around you is telling you that. It's
really interesting you say that, because I don't mean to be rude when I say this, but a lot of those people do come across to people outside of the group as a little bit arrogant sometimes. Just the movements, and I always wondered maybe that's just how they walk and talk and things. But from what you're saying, there is genuinely a little bit of arrogance.
Yeah, I mean, that's 100%. If you read the prayers or it's all about we're the chosen nation, we're better than them, we're better than the non-Jews. And I have non-Jewish colleagues now, and I just laugh when I think about that narrative because it just doesn't make any sense. You know, when you're a child and you buy it.
Tell me about the language as well, because that's an interesting one. Because I can't think of anything stranger for me than the idea of somebody growing up either in Brooklyn or in North London and not having a good grasp of English. Is it? There's a difference between the men and the boys and the girls, is there, in learning English?
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on. Because the boys literally, especially the Hasidic boys, their education is limited to about 2 hours a day, roughly, and then their secular education generally stops completely at around age 11, 12. So most of them don't have more than a basic primary school level of reading or maths, writing and maths. Some of the boys will talk English at home, so their spoken language might be a bit better. So my brothers, for example, they've got an accent, like they sound like foreigners. Women, basically, we did our GCSEs. We didn't do A-levels, really. Sometimes some of the students went on to do A-levels independently, but it wasn't encouraged. Like when I was 16, I left school, we went to what was called a seminary, where mostly a lot of the lessons were around kind of preparing us basically for an arranged marriage and to live a very holy kind of Jewish life. So the laws around practical aspects of running a Jewish home, like the dietary laws, etc. And that's it. Like, you know, so for me personally, I was lucky to have a career. I got my GCSEs, but then everything else after that I had to do independently. So let me be clear. The girls, by no means are they getting a full secular education. Most of the girls don't have A-levels, certainly are not allowed to go to university.
Yeah, it does. It sounds so restrictive. And there's a Yiddish word, isn't there, for the person who sets you up to get married?
The shadchan, yes. So when I reached the age of about 18, 19, my parents will get in touch with these like known men or women in the community who are known to, you know, be those matchmakers, and they will try to find a suitable family. And if they have a boy or girl of the same age, they will suggest that match to the parents. Usually the boy and girl will know nothing about it at that stage. In my case, they were looking for a boy. My father wanted somebody who was very devout. He would go to the yeshiva where the boys are and interview him as such. And it wouldn't be an interview about, are you going to be a good husband for my daughter? It would be an interview around how, you know, how good is his Jewish learning and knowledge, really. They booked an engagement hall, and just bear in mind, I hadn't even met him. I didn't even know who he was. The next week I met his parents. The boy's mother, you know, she was having a discussion, just sort of chit chat. The men were making financial arrangements about the money, who's paying for what. And then the next week I met my husband to be. I met him on a Sunday night, and then we got engaged on Monday night. And that was it.
Do you feel like property in those moments?
Well, you don't know what you feel really, because, you know, looking back, I would say yes, but at the time, no, because there's a lot of pressure to get engaged at a young age because all your friends are getting engaged. And if you don't get it, like if you're not married by the age of 22, 23, you're already considered like an old maid, like, you know, what's wrong with you? And you're an outcast and people feel sorry for you. And they think that you've got a problem. So you want to fit in. So you want to get married. So there's something exciting about it. And obviously you've never met a boy and, you know, they like marriage, you know, you kind of every girl's dream. So you kind of hope and wish, you know. So somewhere deep down there's this sense of like, oh my God, I actually don't even know this man. And when you don't really pay attention because you also want to please everyone around you.
I don't want to sound glib at all, but were you hoping he would be attractive?
Yeah, no. It's interesting because I was telling my daughter the other day, because she's 16 and she's got, you know, typical teenager, boys and girls and all the politics that go in with it and figuring out who you like and who you don't like. And she was asking me, you know, Mom, you know, and I was like, well, the first man, and you know, I didn't even talk to my teenage cousins.
Did you really not? You really didn't? You weren't allowed to talk to boys at all?
No, boy, like if I'd go to my grandma's house, which is maybe where I'd meet them, it would be like they'd just look down at the floor. Hasidic boys particularly are very much brainwashed, like not to look at women, not to have any interactions with women, because God forbid they're going to be attracted to one. And then obviously any kind of interactions with women outside of marriage is completely a no-no.
So your first conversation with your husband to be at that point, who you were going to get engaged with the following day, how did you feel?
You feel like it's not in your hands, even like it's not even in your control. So you're kind of looking for things that, like, hopefully you'll feel like I can live with this man. The first conversation was terrible. It was just very tense, very similar to like Esty and Yankee. Second meeting was slightly more relaxed, but then at the end of it, he's proposing to me, and you're like thinking, I remember just like, well, what am I supposed to say? I mean, my grandma, my aunts, everyone's out there waiting for that, like, they've got all the, they're waiting, like it's done. For them, it's done. They're told the whole family that I'm getting engaged that day. It was all sorted. So, and it was almost like, I said to my dad, I said to him, maybe he's a nice boy. I just don't know. And I was like, I don't feel like I'm ready to live with him. My dad was like, oh, everybody goes through it. Don't worry. It'll be fine. Don't worry. You'll get used to it. It'll be all right. So, and then my mum was like, look, you have to understand, you're only going to get older. He's a great boy. You're not going to get anything better. So to me, it was like almost like, well, I'm going to turn this down. Who's to say the next one is going to be any better? Like I didn't feel I had any connection with him at all. I had no desire or interest. I remember he tried to call me during my engagement. I just used to pretend I'm sleeping, or I never came to I wasn't really interested.
He tried to call you. Are phones allowed and 3G and everything?
No, it was through the house line. All he would do was give me a Torah, like a sort of Torah thought, like something that he'd learned that week.
So he'd call up and say just some interesting thing he'd learned from the Bible, almost like a love extension.
No love, nothing about love.
Yeah. So you then, how long between the engagement and the marriage?
6 months for me.
And so those 6 months, were you starting to turn things over in your mind, or were you calm?
It was like this sense of like going on a train that you can't get off. Like you're just going on this journey and you just hope for the best, really. My wedding day was very stressful. And like, as the wedding kind of went on, it was like this sense of like, now I can almost say to people like, well, I was going to be raped that night. I didn't know that at the time, but that's really what it is, because I'm forced to have sex with this man who I actually wasn't attracted to. Actually, we had nothing to say to each other, Andrew. We had nothing. It's all, prescribed. You have to do this. You don't have a choice, because what you're told is that the marriage is only consummated if you have sex. So it's like this pressure, like, because otherwise you're not allowed to be alone in a house with him. So it's kind of this like part of the Jewish marriage. You have to, the completion of the marriage happens when the man and woman have relations, so you have to do it.
Is that evening?
Yes.
It's like the end of the wedding, everybody knows what's about to happen, and you go off. And
I remember at the end of the wedding standing outside the hall and wishing that I could just go to somebody's car and be whisked away, far, far away. See, when you're going to be raped, that's how you're going to feel. No daughter of mine is going to ever experience that. That's just not going to happen. Like, I'm going to do everything to prevent that, because I think that's institutional rape. And it's almost a sense of like all these people are around and they all know, they're all colluding in it. It feels like it. Yeah. But no, it's all very solemn, and nobody talks about it. Like it's not discussed.
Oh my word.
Are you fascinated by unexplainable crimes, conspiracies, and fringe culture? Well, step into the crawl space. From tales of survival and deepfakes to synchronicities and cryptozoology, Crawl Space is a podcast that brings you weekly stories of the mysterious, harrowing, and bizarre. Search Crawl Space wherever you listen to podcasts. Crawl Space, where crime meets culture.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And together we host a weekly true crime podcast called The Prosecutors.
In every episode, we bring our unique perspective as full-time prosecutors to the most famous and debated true crime mysteries. Whether it's Maura Murray, Scott Peterson, or the Delphi murders, Brett and I dig deep to bring you details you won't hear anywhere else.
Our podcast is about more than just a story. We will walk you through the legal problems lurking behind every case, breaking down the complexities of the criminal justice system with humor and a personal touch. And it's not just true crime. We bring the same training and approach we've learned as prosecutors to classic mysteries like the Dyatlov Pass incident and the ghost ship Mary Celeste.
So if you're looking for a true crime podcast with a different point of view, The Prosecutors is the one for you. Find us wherever you get your podcasts.
21-year-old UMass student Maura Murray disappeared after crashing her car on a hairpin turn in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. This is the mystery that sparked a cultural obsession.
Missing Maura Murray is the definitive podcast on the case.
Dig deep with hosts Tim Polari and Lance Reencirna as they parse fact from conspiracy and fight to gain closure.
Search Missing Maura Murray wherever you listen to podcasts.
And be warned, you too may become obsessed.
When did you start to think back and think, I was raped?
I read The Handmaid's Tale recently. I teach English A-level, and there's chapter 16, and it's called The Ceremony, where the handmaid is forced to have sex with the commander.
Yeah.
And you read that chapter, and I read that chapter to my students, and I think, yeah, Margaret Atwood's got it right. This is what it's like. You know, when you get a perspective of what happens in the outside world and what's normal, I think that's when you can kind of start expressing, oh, okay.
I'm so sorry that you went through that.
Yeah, no, it's which is why I'm kind of quite passionate about speaking up about these things, because I feel like I didn't have that voice.
Yeah.
And I was forced to do things I didn't want to. I was just reading this morning on Twitter, there's been a lot of criticism on unorthodox, going back to that, where people are saying, Jewish people, oh, you know, we need to make another unorthodox which shows the Haredi community in a positive light, because this is only going to encourage anti-Semitism.
Right.
And there's been a lot of backlash even from the Haredi community, and some people would see us as like completely deranged and crazy because we are calling up on these practices which are evil. In my opinion, they've just used the Bible as a justification to do evil, just control and power, really. Yeah. So I don't know. Do you have an opinion on that?
If people are saying, unorthodox is unfair and it's going to make people anti-Semitic, that it makes me quite angry that people think that, because they should actually just be anti the Haredi community for the reasons that you are stating. That's my 2 cents on it.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's interesting. But we have had a lot of people from the wider Jewish community who were very I've even had a meeting with Board of Deputies and people from there saying to us like, oh, you shouldn't be the one calling out on the practices that are wrong or evil in the community, because it's just going to cause, there's a fear non-Jewish people are going to suddenly see us as bad and it's not going to look good for our image. Evil is evil. It doesn't matter what it looks like or where it's found, really.
When they tell you that you shouldn't be calling it out because we might somehow be associated, the best way for us secular Jewish people to not be associated with it is by us calling it out and saying we are not them.
When people leave the community, the treatment that the Haredi community give those people, and a big example of that is people who leave with their children, what they do is they alienate the children. The woman, the character that I mostly related to on that unorthodox was Esther's mother. You know, coming to her own daughter's wedding and finding out the narrative that her daughter's been given about her, that she's abandoned her child when actually they filed for, you know, full custody and completely alienated and kept Esty away from her own birth mother. Yeah. And that is something that I experienced myself, and the community will do everything. Yeah. Recently, they had a Save the Children campaign. There's a woman we're supporting. She just wants to live in the wider Jewish community, put her children into Jewish schools, but not Haredi schools. She doesn't want to live, you know, with those restrictions and that lifestyle. And the community have set up a campaign to raise thousands and thousands of pounds to pay barristers and solicitors to fight for her ex-husband to make sure that he has full custody of the children, because she's not seen as a suitable parent because she's not religious anymore. They will get community members to speak to the children, make them say false allegations against the parent who is leaving the Haredi community. And unfortunately for me, my parents colluded with my ex-husband in being involved in that court battle. They didn't support me, they supported him. That was, like, unfortunately for me, that was the end of that relationship.
We should get back on track then, onto your life. So you got married, you had some children.
Yeah, so I got pregnant 6 weeks after my wedding. Looking back, I had no idea how young I was. I was only 21 when my daughter was born. And by the time I was 29, I had 5 children. And I think that was when I started to feel increasingly unhappy. I also I did a degree and I did a master's through the Open University while I was sort of having my children. There was something, I guess, inside of me that was always interested about the outside world. And as the internet was kind of becoming a bit, there was kind of expanding, there was more stuff online. I was just more interested.
I thought it was banned, the internet, in the Haredi communities.
It was. I guess that's where I was rebellious. Eventually I got Wi-Fi in the house. My husband had no knowledge of it.
He had no knowledge of the Wi-Fi in the house.
No knowledge. Well, to my advantage, my English, I dealt with all the bills and How did
you get the person to come over and do it all? Or did you do it yourself?
I think it was Talk. They sent me the box in the post, and there was this cupboard with our meter readings. So I just kind of plugged it in there, and I was just like, I don't even think he asked me, but I remember thinking, I'll just say something to do with electricity, because I did all the meter readings. I sorted all of that out, all the bill, everything. So that was quite good. It gave me a window to another world outside of that community. And I think that as you grow older and later in my 20s, you just realize that there's something else outside. And then I started questioning, like teaching Shakespeare, and I was in a Haredi school where we were not allowed to teach Romeo and Juliet. All the texts that I taught had to be checked through, right, by other communities. So why, what's wrong? Why are we hiding knowledge from the kids?
How long does it take to start thinking, right, I'm out of this?
I think the thought was always there. I remember when I had my third child, a friend of mine was divorced, and I remember feeling really jealous of her, which was really strange. And I just researched into kind of what was kind of support out there for women in, wanting to leave their marriage. I found Jewish Women's Aid. They gave me the idea that it's possible. I think my marriage at the same time became even more unbearable because it felt like I don't have to be putting up with all this.
You had a choice.
Yes. Yeah.
Was part of you sad about what it would, how it would hurt him, or that you would miss him, or anything like that?
Before we separated, and a couple of nights before he left, he was really in tears, and really it was hard. And there was a sense of feeling sorry, but I also knew that I had given everything, and it was all at my expense and my misery that I'd given. Yeah. And it was just a sense of, you have one life to live, and I think, I just had to it felt like this is the decision I had to make for me. I had to separate first, and my husband refused to leave the house. He was like, I'm staying here. And if anything, you're going to leave the house and leave the kids behind. Okay. And obviously I couldn't, that was not going to happen. So I had a very kind rabbi who supported me at that point. And like I said, I was still very religious. I just wanted to get divorced. It was only after I got divorced that I started thinking, well, what kind of life do I want for myself and my children, that I realized I kind of started moving out of the Haredi community. 2 years, Andrew, I was stuck in a custody battle, trying to find and sort of think about a life outside of the community, because it just became basically untenable. Like, I'll give you an example. I was working in a Haredi school as a teacher, and I was basically asked to leave my job. I'd worked there as head of English department for 5 years. Overnight, I'd become this terrible woman who was doing terrible things.
And what was the situation then with your children?
So I was lucky. The courts obviously supported my decisions. They supported my application. So the children were able to live with me. It's this sense of my children not even knowing what could have been.
That's so funny. You must look at them every day and think like how lucky it is that they don't have to grow up in that world.
Well, I don't think about it every day. I think there's some things we don't, but I do. No. Yeah. But there's definitely there. Oh, it's there. It's absolutely there in the background of that sense of my son is studying for his A-levels now, and knowing that he would be in a completely different place had I not left. Is there, of course, absolutely.
When you left, did you remain in a more secular version of the Jewish community? Do you remain to this day religious in any way?
I call myself traditional. Like we'd do the Friday night dinner or the Chagim, we'd celebrate, but it's in no way like religious based. Like I feel like it's very much cultural. Like perhaps something similar to how you grew up. Your Jewish identity is part of who you are, but it's a very cultural rather than based on any religious beliefs. Okay,
that's nice. And when you first left, so you were free. You were going to be less religious, but still part of the community. What was it like for you? Were you scared out in this world?
I think a lot of the struggles has been kind of to adjusting to kind of working in a secular environment. It is a sense like going into a new country, really, and trying to learn a new culture, really.
So what have you got any examples, like something that we wouldn't even think of that for you was quite new and fresh and weird?
I went to a job interview. It was very soon after I'd left the Heretical community. Now, in the Heretical community, you dress, there's the standard dress of, covered up and everything. So it was me experimenting, and so I was wearing these trousers or jeans now, I know they were. And I didn't even think that you don't know the difference between what is formal wear, informal wear. So I went to a job interview wearing jeans and this like flimsy, not even t-shirt, but like, I'm not even thinking about it. And then I didn't get the job. And I just thought, like, as an afterthought, to ask the head teacher why it was that. And he just was that on the phone. He was like, but did you even realize, like, a really like angry tone? You dress completely inappropriately. Like, we can't employ you like that, that. And it was like that, like, it was like somebody had hit me slapped me on the face. Like, oh my God. Like, and then obviously I went out shopping, and it was like, I bought myself formal clothes, and it's been, obviously that kind of like lesson that I learned the hard way, really, because I had no idea.
That's incredible. Did you explain to this angry person why you weren't aware of that?
No, I didn't. I didn't even know what to take of it. I was really upset over something so stupid, like this is ridiculous. No. How could I not have known, the obvious? But I didn't.
Of course not.
I don't know. Maybe if I would have been a bit smarter, I looked around a bit better. But it's all these things that I've constantly got to look around and think, okay, so that, what's normal, what's not normal. I'm always feeling like I'm just still learning to some extent.
How often, if ever, do you speak to your parents?
Well, strangely enough, I actually got in touch with my sister last week for the first time in 10 years. She was just a teenager when I left. So very strange experience. She's now married with 3 children and the same age as I was when I separated from my husband. She would like me to contact my parents, but for me personally, I've got this inner struggle. I just don't know. I don't want to be, I need to kind of accept in a sense, but how do you accept it? And if it's going to be, you want to have a relationship with someone, you want it to be positive, but can it be, so there's a lot of, it's obviously quite complex.
I think all of us grow up with this feeling of wanting to impress our parents and our siblings and for them to be proud of us. So is that very difficult for you, I suppose, knowing that nothing you ever do in this world can impress and make them proud?
Absolutely. They like, to them, I let them down completely. Like the good daughter, like almost like my sister, the way she was talking about me in the past, like she'd idolized me. I was perfect in her eyes, doing all the right things. And then suddenly like something went, like almost like they see like I had a mental breakdown or something, like what happened to that person. And the way they see me now, I think for my sister, she's coming to terms with it. She's like asking me about my job and asking, trying to get a sense of what my life is like. So she's, torn, I think, but there's always that sense of like, but, I left that, I'm living a secular life. So yeah, you're never going to be in their eyes, and that's something difficult for both of us, I think, as well, both of us really.
When did you last speak to your parents?
It was 10 years ago, 10 years now.
Oh.
Yeah.
What would happen if you called them up now?
Well, I know my mother is trying to get in touch with me because she contacted somebody that I know and left this whole, sort of wanting this woman to give this message to me, updating me and letting me know that she really is eager. And now my sister's obviously telling me, and my mother's been completely heartbroken. Like she actually watched my mum breaking down in actual tears. Like I lost my daughter, like, almost like as if a child of hers died. And, I suddenly like recognized her pain, but also that sense of, but you weren't there for me and you betrayed me. And, you caused this. So a conversation with her, it would probably be very stilted and awkward. I don't know, Andrew. I don't even have the answers.
Maybe one day.
Yes. Yeah. Older and wiser and just kind of able to kind of be like, well, what they did is on them. And just kind of have the moral high ground.
Did you remarry then?
No, I mean, I don't know if I would ever get married again.
Okay.
But no, I would definitely, getting into a relationship of my choosing and on my terms.
Would you go on the apps?
Definitely, yeah. Maybe you can recommend some, Andrew. I don't know. I'll need to go on these single mom groups and say, right, guys, which ones work?
Let me ask you then. This is I don't mean to be glib or anything, but would you go on JDate, which for people who don't know is the Jewish dating app?
Yes, I think I don't think I would narrow myself down to that, but I would definitely consider that.
Okay.
Maybe sometimes the shared background, might help. But from what I've seen, from just seeing people who have left the community like myself, there's been equally successful relationships, people with Jewish, non-Jewish. Yeah. And I think sometimes my conclusion is kind of like, it's down to the person, if you connect to someone. But I'm definitely open to try that.
You started up Gesher EU. So what's the story?
I just had a sense that there must be people out there who, like me, wanting to live a different life. But there was that sense, there was no support. There was Jewish charities like Jewish Women's Aid, who were very helpful, even Norwoods, who supported me with my children. I also went on a trip to New York and found this organization called Footsteps. And for the first time, met lots of people like me who had been through the community. And it was absolutely exhilarating. It was like all these people who got me and understood me and had similar stories to me. And there was that sense of, we have to have something here in the UK. And why isn't there something in the UK? We had our first meeting in December 2012. 30 people showed up, and it was literally from there. And I think mainly the thing is, when you leave that community of support, you lose your friends, you lose your family, you lose all those connections that you take for granted growing up. So Gesher kind of aims to replace a lot of that. And also some of the basic things like helping with education or navigating the court process, people leaving a community where you don't know much about the outside world, telling people how to dress for an interview. If whatever it is so that they have that support, that network there for them.
Yeah. I like the idea that there's somebody a little bit like you 10 years ago, or how you were, in the community now, with Wi-Fi secretly installed, who's watching this conversation and thinking, I better go to Gesher EU now. And
maybe that's the way I kind of deal with what the kind of anger. And I think when I was finished with all of the process of leaving, it was almost like, I know why people don't leave, because it's so damn difficult. It really, really is. It comes at you from all angles. And I knew it would be very, very difficult, but I don't think I realized, just go, it's traumatic. I haven't even been able to, we need another video to talk about all the challenges that, from financial to practical to, fear of losing your children and everything that's taken from you, and the way the community will do everything to make sure that you fail, that you're not successful. My dad was like, you're going to end up in a mental institution. You do, I consider myself a strong woman, mentally strong, physically, and those moments of they do that. They really do that. And whatever their reasons, they probably don't want people to leave. So that kind of being able to resolve that through the charity, maybe there's that part of it where you feel like, well, nobody should go through what I had to go through. Well, they are going to, but maybe let's make sure that it's not as difficult.
Yeah.
That they're not doing it alone. So I think that's the motivation, I think, in any case.
So last question here. Do you miss being part of the community? And if so, what do you miss?
Talking to my sister, and I know that somewhere, it does, there's the losses there, whether it's the songs or the bits of it that we did enjoy, like being together as a family, but there's also that sense of but I can't go back there, I'm living in the present. So yeah, it's.
And it sounds like you're doing a good job of living in this present. I'm happy you're on our side now.
No regrets, definitely.
If you listened this far, it leads me to believe you're interested in this kind of content, in which case, please do subscribe on the podcast app, leave a review, a good one, hopefully, Also, go subscribe to my YouTube page for the video version, where you'll find photos of Emily from when she was in the community. It was fascinating speaking to her. She's a really lovely, wonderful person. I even went to see her in her house, and she welcomed me in, and she was very nice. And please do visit geshereu.org.uk. If you're looking to find my YouTube page, by the way, which is not always that easy, I'll be linking to it on AndrewGold_OK on Twitter. It's the same as my Instagram handle. That's a lot of social media pages, but if you get to Twitter, AndrewGold_OK, you'll find about a bazillion links to the YouTube page and to this very podcast, which you're already on. So that won't be of much use to you. See you next week when I'll be with Justin Hall, the first ever blogger. And he had a fight with Kurt Vonnegut, the writer. And it's one hell of a story.
And I publish my life on the internet, and it doesn't make people want to be with me. It makes people not trust me, and I don't know what the to do about it. I want to relate so badly. And I can't find people I can relate to.
From the Kardashians and One Direction to Kelly Clarkson and Donald Trump, every influencer and reality star owes a debt to Justin Hall, the world's first ever blogger. If oversharing online has become a disease, I like to think of Justin as patient zero of our social influenza. And yet, you've probably never heard of him.
I'm a 20-year-old guy. I can write about my life, and thousands of people will come and read it every day. This is really a revolution.
His is a tale of the cautionary variety. When he was just 8, his father killed himself in a corner of the family home. Justin went to therapy, where he developed a penchant for oversharing to anyone who'd listen, judge, and advise. The web came around at just the right time, allowing him an outlet for these thoughts and feelings. For some time, he was the darling of the early web, and he amassed a following in the tens of thousands in the early 90s. Steadfast in his commitment to document every minor and major detail in his life and lay himself bare, he, quite literally, lay himself bare, his sexy pornographic photos juxtaposing well with images of his flaccid, infected penis. A work of art he calls cat dick.
What would happen if you went all the way, being radically honest, totally transparent, exposing yourself to distant strangers? Why would anyone want to do that?
As friends and family began to call him out for writing about them on the net, Justin fell apart, leading to the breakdown video you heard at the top of this recording. You'll find that, along with everything else, on his blog, links.net, which has been running since 1993 in its original format. It's a digital museum. The highlights of his story include the time he travelled across the states to meet his followers and teach them to make their own websites, and the time he had a physical altercation with writer Kurt Vonnegut. All of this has led him, I'm pleased and humbled to say, to a conversation on this podcast about how it all began, what led to his breakdown, and how he sees the future of online sharing, blogging, and influencing. We also talk about cat dick. You are the world's first ever blogger, is that right?
No. What about Samuel Pepys? Well, no, he didn't blog because he didn't publish it. But, you know, I mean, I think I'm early. I like to say I'm early. And, you know, some folks have called me first, and I've repeated those statements. But, sure, I was very early. Definitely one of the first people on the internet to take all their clothes off and try to tell their personal truth in hypertext with clickable links and pictures.
I've seen it all.
That's probably safe to say.
You know what? You're more similar to Samuel Pepys in that sense than do you know my favorite Samuel Pepys story was that he used to go to church and learn to masturbate without touching himself.
Wow.
Yeah.
I listened to Kenneth Branagh read his diaries aloud, and that wasn't in there.
It's very possible that because I studied English years ago at university, so it's very possible the teacher was making fun of us. I should look that up. Should I look that up?
Yeah, time to go back.
Samuel Pepys, whose name is spelt ridiculously.
Yes.
Masturbate in church, no hands.
This is your Google history.
Here we go. While I know. Oh, you do, mate. I've been investigating pedophiles. It's one of the videos I'm going to release soon. So my history is pretty crazy.
A sad history.
While he mastered the art of masturbation without using his hands. There's something here in the independent.co.uk, which is a reputable source, which isn't what you were doing on your blog, but they both featured appendages.
I was definitely using my hands.
Yeah, to create a blog.
Yes, and to digest whatever was going on. And
well, everybody knows who the Kardashians are. They don't necessarily know who you are, and I think they should do, because I think your life is infinitely more, I don't want to sound like a sycophant, but infinitely more interesting than theirs. So would you be able to, could you start at the beginning a little bit? So what happened?
My father had he had a lot to drink. That was part of what was his challenge, is that he had a lot to drink. And as a result of him drinking a lot, it led him to a place where he couldn't stay alive, and he took himself out of the picture. So I was 8 when my father committed suicide, and that was a very challenging, obviously it's a very challenging situation for any family. In our case, my mom was able to find excellent child psychologists who, I saw a child psychologist like 2 or 3 days a week for years. And I think that practice of sort of talking about myself and telling someone who I think I am and having someone actually listen and go through things with me left me with this practice of talking to myself about myself, or listening to myself talk about myself, or getting outside of my problems and framing them. I'm also just a wordy guy, so my timing was, I was a citizen graduating high school, at the age of 17 in 1993, and by the time I got to college, I was like, oh my God, you can click a link. Before the web, you had to type everything into the internet. The internet was there, and it was filled with all kinds of weird stuff, but you had to type everything. It was like you had to know the spells to cast.
What was the internet? For someone like myself, and probably a lot of the listeners, what's the best way of describing what the internet was?
A giant inbox filled with messages that you could only read if you typed the right sequence of commands, and you couldn't really search across the whole internet. You had to go to each individual little server. So you go to, and most of them were at schools. So you go to some school server and they'd be like, here's our archive of volcanic data, or here's our collection of like scanned Milton poems, or whatever. They would have these stashes of information in these university servers, and you could bounce between these public servers. And then there was something called news groups, and the news groups were basically a little bit like Reddit or Twitter, where anyone who was on the internet could post. It wasn't anonymous, but you could post, and you could post about what you liked in these various topic areas. Yeah. And there were thousands of topics. So I was in high school looking at news groups, and I liked Frank Zappa, or I was bisexually curious, or I was excited about Japanese comics, and those were things that maybe I couldn't check out in my school, but I could go read about online and be like, oh my God, the world's crazy, and it's much bigger than I knew from what Chicago had to show me. You could download images, which was very exciting, because you could download pornography, but it was quite innocent. It would be like a scanned magazine, mostly innocent, and then it would load, the way the graphics worked, it would load one line at a time, and your modem was really slow, so you'd be like, wow, oh, I think it's a person with brown hair. Oh, they have brown hair. Whoa, their hair's pretty long. Are they going to wear a shirt? Oh my God, they're not wearing a shirt. Wow, and you'd sort of watch the reveal of the images. So when I saw the web, where it's like, oh, there's images and text, and there's a link, and you can click on the link and go to another image, it's like, whoa, this is really, they've really fixed this internet thing up. There's quite a lot more to get around with. So I started making a lot of web pages, because the work in writing and sharing that I was excited about could now be done by connecting pieces visually for people.
There was a period very early on, I think, where you said that there were about 600 websites in the world. So you were able to, in one weekend, put up a link to every single one and sort of write something about each one.
Oh, thank you. I love that you have read some of what I've said and stitched it together into a story. Let me say that in the early days, there were hundreds of sites, and you could surf the whole thing in a couple of weekends. But when I put up my pages, I made these subject area directories, sort of like what's weird, what's sexy, what's on there about drugs, where would you find music. So I was doing these topic areas, like here's 10 great cool links about music. Here's 5 great links about Native American indigenous knowledge. And there were no search engines, so you had to go from one site to another. So if you went across the public web in early 1994 and you didn't find what you thought should be there, you should make it. I felt personally called to post a lot of links. And for me, it was like, wow, now there's no editors, no publishers, no gatekeepers. Check it out, everybody. Here's the crazy people talking.
Wow. And how did it turn then from what was essentially a one-way sort of publication into a conversation?
Yeah, I put my email address up and people started writing me. So I'm putting up all these links, and email was the only way to speak back. There's not really there were no comments on web pages. There were no web forms to write your details in, and there were no message boards on the web. My very first web pages were a lot about the web itself. Here's what I'm finding. Let me give you a tour. I called the site Links from the Underground. So come visit my links. I'll show you around the web. I'll give you a tour.
Sure.
And then enough people were checking that out. I said, oh, well, if you come for the web tour, meet your tour guide. My dad died. I have this girlfriend, but then we broke up, and I like to masturbate or whatever. Like, I'm 19. Here's all my thoughts. So then people started writing me with their thoughts and their stories, and it got pretty heavy pretty fast, because my bet, Andrew, was that I was going to tell very personal, revealing, difficult stories about my life, and that would make the media more human, and it would help promote empathy, right? If people could say, oh, this guy, he may be like a child of privilege, and he may be like another white guy ranting about what he likes, but his dad died. That makes him interesting. And, he has feelings about these people. And, somehow that would help people see me. And then maybe I could see them. People would write me and say, my dad also died, or I drink too much and your reading you made me want to stop drinking, or whatever. And I would say, wow, you just gave me like a very big emotional load over email that I don't feel qualified to hold, because I'm not a trauma counselor. I'm not a therapist. I don't know what the next thing to say to you is after you tell me that you want to stay alive and stop drinking. So my advice to all of them was, you should have your own webpage, because then you can publish these things that you want to tell me and find an audience of your own and help.
Yeah.
It was a very idealistic sort of notion, but, I put up some tutorials, and I think I was able to help a lot of people take that first step of, oh, maybe I will try being on the web. And a lot of people sort of came on the web and said, I'm going to have a diary, and I'm going to tell people what I'm about. And I would encourage those people, let's all have diaries. We'll build empathy. We'll read each other's diaries. But after a few years, it's like we all sort of looked around and said, oh, man, having a diary in public, if you really want to be honest, is kind of not sustainable. The internet grew. They invented search engines. And suddenly being vulnerable in public started implicating other people, started implicating people in their jobs, and became socially untenable for most folks, unless you were explicitly a performer, right? And this is what you could do to be in public, which you mentioned this family, the Kardashian family of Los Angeles. They are people for whom they have adapted living in public as a profession, as a vocation,
a performance.
For me, I thought everybody would do it as like a social connection, but I think that was extremely naive and maybe appropriate for what the internet was in 1994 and appropriate for a 19-year-old Justin. But today, I'm not doing that myself. I don't share on the internet. I don't have time to live in public as a vocation. I had this moment when my passion, my interest, my need to share and connect with people connected, aligned with this new technology. And I created an autobiography on the internet that's like thousands of individual HTML pages connected together with links. It's a relic, because every time I look at it, I want to fix something. But, I think for other people to look at it, it's like my webpage today is a vision of what I thought the web was going to look like. and it's a museum, man. It's
Yeah, please don't change a thing, because it really looks amazing now. I mean, that's one of the few surviving relics, as you say. It's so fascinating. I'd encourage anyone to go and have a look at that website, because it's just nostalgia alone. Now they've got to have a look, and there are certain things they have to see, I think, which we'll get onto in a bit, I think. But yeah, the way you described it just now, with people who would get in touch and you didn't know what to say, so you'd encourage that they make a website, and I suppose they would get emails from people and not know what to say and encourage others. It sounds a little bit like a pyramid scheme. Do you know what I mean? There's no everybody's sort of.
Absolutely.
Did any of it work to actually help you feel better?
You know, I think for me, what was really intoxicating was I started hearing from people who didn't necessarily, give me a trauma that they needed me to hold, but just said, hey, you've given me confidence to be myself in my community, or you've given me an idea for a project I want to do, or would you please come talk to our group? And so I got a tremendous amount of enrichment. I just was like, pay attention to me. Please pay attention to me. And people were like, oh, this is a new medium and here's a performer. I'll pay attention to you. And so I got a lot out of that sort of architecture. Yeah. And then I realized there was too much attention for me to handle. At my peak in January 1995, I had like 27,000 daily readers. For like a 20-year-old guy writing a web page, like with 27,000 daily readers, it was an enormous amount of sort of just attention to be channeling. And so for me to be able to like, hey, you, let's go look at this other person. Let's look at this other person. Let's spread this around. You start a webpage. You start a webpage. I'm going to send people over there. I didn't even want 27,000 daily readers, because they wanted from me. They wanted me to like up the ante, to be more interesting, for things to happen. And so it was better for me to say, well, let's get more people up on stage. I'm not, holy smokes, this is a little crazy. I was part of a group of people that felt very idealistic. We're going to make the internet a post-TV, no filters, human expression wonderland, And so other people who came in there, I think for a little golden age, we felt like, oh my God, it's true. The internet is this incredible place. But if you looked at it, it was like white people who like went to colleges. Like that was the internet. I look at the internet today and the breadth of people who are on the internet. Like I could use the internet to send like a text message to like somebody very far away in a very different life. And I think that's what the dream of the internet is.
Although hopefully no one will notice that we're a couple of middle-class white males right now.
I'm sure people will notice, and maybe they'll watch it because it's still meaningful to them, and maybe we're part of history and so that matters, but maybe it's only our story and it's only for us, and that's okay, right? If you want to tell your story in public, you have to be okay just talking to yourself.
What sort of possessed you to put pictures of your flaccid penis on the web, and were they is that the sort of one of the very first dick pics?
I mean, I think inherent in the dick pic form is that it's like a person-to-person sort of sending. I think the urge to sort of splash one's genitals out on a larger stage way predates me. Anything having to do with sex on my webpage was very popular. I said, I got to get more sex content to put on my webpage. So I had photos of myself that my ex-girlfriends had taken or that I had or whatever. And so I was like, well, I'll just put up centerfolds of myself.
Yeah.
If there's no gatekeeper, you can put up sexy photos of yourself. Yeah. And why not? And I felt sexy and wanted to be cool, and and it's fun. It was just fun for me.
So I didn't see the sexy photos. I just saw the photo of what you called cat dick.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I have a page of centerfolds of me. It was just a wild ride. I'm posting these sexy photos of myself and stories about, psilocybin mushroom trips or like school papers, and my website's accumulating all this materials, poems about people. And, I would go to a party and come home and write up like what I thought about somebody. Search engines started coming out, and then people I loved and knew and, was acquainted with started searching for their names. And the very first search result for a lot of people was, Justin says that I am emblematic of late stage capitalism,
Right.
or Justin says we had a great time on mushrooms, or Justin took this photo of himself naked right after he visited my house, and they said, I don't want to be implicated in any of this stuff that you're writing on your crazy webpage about your thing. This isn't my thing.
Was that hurtful for you?
Yeah, well, it was like, I thought, I'm building empathy, I'm telling my story, I'm being honest. And then I realized after a while, like, my honesty implicates other people, and it's aggressive. It was an aggressive act to write about other people on the web and use their name without their permission. And I found myself thinking, like, am I an investigative journalist? Am I like some kind of investigative journalist, like exposing my friends? That's not true. I don't want to expose my friends. I like my friends. I don't need...
It does sound a little bit like an early version of Vice Media.
Well, I think I was 19. Like,
Yeah.
what's interesting to a 19-year-old? Like, loud, aggressive music, like good, interesting, brain-bending substances, and boobs, and, making myself hard, like, I don't know.
That's Vice, isn't it? That's what Vice is.
I was really turned off by Vice when I saw the early print issues, because they would make fun of disabled people.
Oh.
And I remember thinking, like, man, Vice, this is cruel. Like, you got a magazine, you're trying to be cool, and you're making fun of disabled people. Like, I just don't...
That's the criticism, isn't it? Because they, I think, dress themselves up as maybe the saviors, the left-wing progressives. And it's not just what you're talking. That's a surprise to me. I didn't know they were making fun of disabled people.
No, I don't think they were social. I don't think they were like left-wing progressives. I think they were like libertines and liberals. They were like, we like personal freedoms, but I'm not sure they were like in favor of a big social safety net or something, you know?
Okay, yeah. It sort of went a bit more that way, but then there was still, despite that, there were a lot of rumors and things about the way women were treated in the offices there. And...
Oh yeah, and that was after they'd raised like $500 million in funding from like Disney and Miramax or whatever. Like they went into the stratosphere. I think I saw these things. I saw that, like, if I took sex on the internet and I was organized about it, I could build a big business. Somebody was going to make a big business out of, like, being kind of a little bit mean on the internet. I stopped using last names, and I tried to find ways that were just about embarrassing me. In 1998, for example, I published, like, all my expenses, my tax returns,
right,
and make myself vulnerable or make myself an open book for other people, but not implicate my friends and family. And I tried, and finally, by about 2004... I was done. I couldn't do it anymore. And I had to basically retire in 2005.
I got the impression that, the realization that you were hurting people around you, it sort of crippled you. It was maybe more than it would other people. It really, really hurt you.
If I'm, making a web page because I want attention, and I want attention because I need human connection, or I need, feedback, and suddenly I've got all these strangers on the internet who think I'm really interesting but aren't afraid to yell at me, and I've got my friends and family who are with me, and they're nice, and they're talking in a normal tone of voice, and they're willing to hug me, but I'm scaring them because of my webpage. Like, which group do I want to favor in my life?
That led to that video in 2005, which was the same year as that really famous video of the Britney video. Do you remember that one? Leave Britney Alone?
Tell me about it.
There was a guy who didn't look too dissimilar to you, who had very long blonde hair. That's the only thing that was similar. Yeah, are you sure it wasn't you? But and this guy basically got very upset about the way the media was treating. You look like Johnny Depp now, with the, but nowadays Johnny Depp, not the old Johnny Depp. But he got very upset about the way people were treating Britney. Your thing was a lot more personal, but it was around the same time. What led to that? What can you take me through? You're sitting there.
I met a woman that I was very infatuated with quickly. And I went to see her, and I was writing about it on my site and, blogging about this new infatuation and excitement. And I had people who basically had read my archives and were doing like a kind of like a textual analysis, like emotional textual analysis. Like, well, in 2002, you said you were with Amy for these reasons, and then you broke up with her for this, but then you were with this other person for these reasons. And now, based on these patterns, the way you're approaching this new relationship is doomed. Suddenly people are like inside my head based on all the material I'd given them for that reason. I thought I wanted them inside my head. But then they're like second guessing my emotions and second guessing my relationships. And I'm like, this is a nightmare. And the woman I was infatuated with, who was responding to my infatuations, was like, I don't want to be on this website with strangers, sort of picking apart our relationship. Please don't include me. And I said, oh my God, if the person that I want to talk to and share myself with can't be on my website, then what is my website without this love? And I felt so I was like, I either have to be with the person I love or be with this audience on the web. Yeah. Love was much more compelling. And so I was like, I gotta unplug from the web. And, I'd had a habit now of like talking to myself on the internet for 10 years. So it was like pretty, emotionally challenging to stop. And I, but I knew I was going through something. So I turned on the camera. I'm flipping out, but I'll turn on the camera. Recorded myself basically sobbing, posted that online saying, I just had a breakdown. I'm feeling so weird about my website. And then people from eBaum's world found this, which was like an early website where people did, messaging and sort of a lot of like teen boy hijinks. Yeah. And some people were like, oh, here's this guy, here's his address, here's his phone number, here's the name and address and phone number of the woman that he's infatuated with. We should contact these people and teach them a lesson.
Oh my, what lesson?
Well, I think it had to do with not being a faggot, if I remember what the message board said. So, when you read something like that, right, you're like, I'm going to share my soul with the internet because it'll help connect people. And I've fallen in love and I'm so confused. And then someone's like, oh yeah, we're going to come over to your place and teach you a lesson. It's like, whoa, I don't think I want you in my life anymore. I don't think I want this stranger in my home. I don't think I want this person to know who I like. I don't think I couldn't trust the population of the internet. Felt like a not friendly place to me all of a sudden. So
the person you were in love with, was it a man?
No, I'm really straight. Like, I think guys are attractive, and some of them are beautiful. Some of them smell really nice. Some of them are good kissers. But when you come down to it, I dig chicks.
Okay, but so was it that they felt that you were acting in an effeminate way?
That's exactly right. I think the stuff is more about, whoa, what's up with Mr. Feelings? Or like, why is this guy crying in public? What kind of weakness bullshit is that? I don't know. But it was just very strange to be like, I'm in love with this woman. Well, we're going to come teach you a lesson. Like, I don't even know. But all I knew is that these people had angry energy, and I had made myself a target. And I had made this woman I loved a target. Mm-hmm. So I was like, this is not bueno, right? This is not the internet of my dreams, Now, of course, I think like people sling mud like crazy,
We're used to it now. It must have been so shocking at the time, though, because we're so used to trolls and everything now. You just go, okay, yeah, another idiot,
Well, no, I don't think people go, oh, yeah, another idiot. I think people go, oh, my God, I can't believe it. Somebody, because I think anyone can be on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or whatever and say something. And then there's somebody who makes a joke before they get on an airplane about Africa, and they get off the airplane and they've lost their jobs and everybody hates them.
I'm interested in how you felt seeing someone like, I think her name was Justine Sachs. Was that Sacco? Justine Sacco?
Oh, the fired person on the airplane?
Yeah, she said, I'm going to Africa. I hope I don't get AIDS. Just kidding, I'm white.
I think she thought she was being funny.
Yeah.
But, the joke that would play well to her 50 followers does not play well to, a lot of other people.
Yeah.
I don't know how you maintain your honest speech or your incorrect sense of humor and be in a public space. I mean, I think we are in a massive learning exercise of trying to figure out how do we ethically talk honestly in a giant place, with billions of other people. By the time we figure it out, we'll have invented new mediums that make it all the more challenging. But, we're learning that, this is what it's like when a world leader sort of shares what's on the top of their mind every moment with no filter.
It's crazy.
Like, it's kind of unpleasant.
Yeah.
You know?
Sort of almost funny.
Yes. if you have enough distance from it, if you don't feel vulnerable or attacked.
This Is Monsters is a true crime podcast and YouTube channel where I tell the stories of the worst people on the planet. Though the stories of the victims are told, we focus on the monster who carried out the evil act. The show is split into seasons, and each season has a theme. In Season 1, we covered cases of filicide, which is the act of a parent killing their own child. In Season 2, we covered cases of people killing for love. We recently finished up Season 3, where we covered cases of parricide, which is the act of someone killing their parents. Tune in now as we start Season 4, where we dive into the minds of family annihilators, sick individuals who decided to destroy their entire families. Check us out anywhere that you listen to podcasts or on YouTube by searching This Is Monsters.
The following is a collect call from a person presumed nice until proven naughty.
Santa Claus is locked up, and I'm going to get him out. My name's Richie Buck. I'm an amateur podcaster and investigator. If you like true crime, feelings of the holidays, and I ain't just talking about Christmas, and satire, well, Santa may be a criminal, just might be for you. Listen and subscribe now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Ho, ho.
21-year-old UMass student Maura Murray disappeared after crashing her car on a hairpin turn in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. This is the mystery that sparked a cultural obsession.
Missing Maura Murray is the definitive podcast on the case.
Dig deep with hosts Tim Polari and Lance Reed-Sierna as they parse fact from conspiracy and fight to gain closure.
Search Missing Maura Murray wherever you listen to podcasts.
And be warned, you too may become obsessed.
Do you find it seems like you maybe get more emotional around other people, sort of worrying about other people's problems then, because you speak about your own past without so much emotion about your father, for example, something that might trigger other people. It feels like you can speak quite calmly about that.
Well, but I mean, that happened like 30 some years ago. So, I mean, I've had a chance to sort of digest a lot of the dad stuff. But I think you raise a very interesting point, Andrew. You know, this is a nice psychoanalysis podcast for me, gracias. But basically, you know, I think, you know, reconciling with a parent who commits suicide is a bit about saying, wow, somebody I love had problems so big that they couldn't be with me. And then in my life, wrestling with, oh, what would a problem be so big that I would want to stop living? Right? Because my dad, because he chose to leave, I'm thinking like, well, oh, what would make me choose to leave? And then I think I would never choose to leave. And then I'm like, now I'm a dad, and I'm a dad with a job, and I'm starting a company, and I got people who depend on me, and can I be there for everybody, and for my wife and my mom, and you know, and as I think through all this pressure and stuff, and wanting to be there for people, I think, oh, this is a glimpse of some of the pressure that maybe my dad felt, and so just understanding that other people's burdens can affect you. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if I'm uniquely attuned to the suffering of other people. I mean, other people's problems are soon and often your problem, you know?
So we've all had that feeling, I think, when you overshare a little bit and then the person you overshared with comes back with a bit more analysis than you necessarily asked for, and you've invited them in.
Right, or like a list of really pointed recommendations, and you're like, well, I was just kind of talking, but I didn't need advice. I don't really want to quit my job and move to another place.
Yeah,
you know?
break up with your girlfriend.
But I think, yes, right. Oh, okay, I guess, maybe.
Yeah.
I think right now it's tough because I feel that there's important things being said in public about police brutality in my country and all over the world. All these things where, you know, I have opinions, but I don't wade in because it's hard to be a public partisan these days. I feel like if you're not going to be a thoroughly public person with all of your experience and feelings. So, you know, you look at someone like a Kardashian or a Trump or some of these people, they have a constitution that enables them to take the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune in public in front of all these people and brush off the people who hate them and say no thank you to the haters and persist. I'm not built that way for this moment of public combat.
You're the Hamlet. You're more of a Hamlet, and Trump is what was it? It's not King Duncan, is it? The uncle bloke.
Oh, yeah, right. Scar.
I was going to say Scar.
Scar.
I was going to say Scar.
Yes.
That's so funny. I was thinking Scar, and I thought, will he get that reference? Maybe, I don't know.
I got a kid.
Yeah.
That's why. Because I'm like, what happens when my daughter finds my webpage? And then what happens when her friends in middle school find my webpage? Yeah. You know, like, oh, your daddy's wiener is small, or like, your daddy said, you know, whatever. I don't know. What are they going to say? You know?
It looks perfectly normal to me, apart from the redness.
Well, yes. In 2001, I moved to Japan, where I wasn't affecting the people in my life so much. I went to a rural place and, you know, got something kind of weird happened to my penis, and I was really kind of far away from a lot of people who could help me with it. So I posted a picture of it and tried to make it funny, because it was a sad-looking penis, but tried to make it funny.
It is funny. It is funny.
And I posted it on my website and said, could somebody help me diagnose this? And somebody did. Within a few hours, they were like, oh, it looks like you have this. Yeah. This is the problem, and it's fine. It'll go away. So it's like, I love the internet. That was a great moment for the internet. And then there's the cat dick page, which is still up. And, you know, it's really not a great page for polite company. But, you know, part of what I tried to do is to honor my own sense of amusement and my voice when I was that age. Yeah. And, you know, I wouldn't put it up today maybe, but I thought it was funny then.
It's definitely funny. I think it's part of who you are. Yeah, I think leave it. I love looking at the photos of when I was 15 and I looked like an idiot with all my hair everywhere and all this stuff. You know, why would you want to get rid of that stuff?
Yeah.
Do you think having a family that sort of scratched the itch that the blog was trying to scratch?
The importance and the prominence and the value of these kids in my life is so large that it's pushed a lot of other things aside. Because I lost my dad, you know, my wife just took my kids out on an excursion, and I was, you know, brushing my son's hair, you know, like an hour and a half ago, and thinking, I hope this isn't the last time I see you. But if it is the last time I see you, you're a wonderful person, and I love you so much. It's so interesting. Having to pay attention to another child has, you know, helped free me from wanting attention from other people.
Do you still have moments? There must be moments where, because I guess that never really entirely leaves you, where you feel like you wish you had the blog, that it was bigger, or that you could say something and people would listen and it could make you feel better in some way. Or is that gone?
I used to be famous on the internet. I'm very flattered that someone like you would call me and take an interest in what I have to say. I like hearing myself talk, so I get a pleasure out of doing this. But there's...
Yeah, I know that feeling.
So many other people have stepped into the spotlight, and when I look at the people who are really in the spotlight, I think I am not them. I mean, there's a Jake and Logan Paul are these young men who basically have these video series where they stunt around. Yeah, I think it's a young person's game in some ways, or it's a person with a big issue. Like if I'm like, you know, someday I'm like, there's something I understand deeply and I need to tell the world, I will tell the world. And I will tell the world emphatically, repeatedly, and through whatever means I can get my hands on. Yeah. And in 1994, it was, holy shit, have you seen the web?
Yeah.
Holy shit, have you seen the web? I got to tell you, the web's amazing. You got to see the web. And then they saw the web. Yeah. You know, so now I don't need to tell you.
I think that'll be one of the teasers for this podcast. But, you know, it's interesting because I feel like you're a very authentic person. That's what it's always been about. And then I've been speaking to academics who study the field, and they talk about parasocial relations and calibrated amateurism. This sort of fake way of setting a stage in which you're friends with the person, but I don't feel like they really care about the people in their group. I think whereas I got the sense with you that you really, really did, and maybe that's gone now. The innocence of the internet, and now is that too negative what I'm saying?
Yes. I think here's what I would like to say.
Yeah.
There are new ways of expression being born. All these things, there are continually new ways, especially for young people, to find that feel authentic to them. I never want to say the moment has passed for authenticity, or the moment has passed for true connection, or the moment has passed to really blow people's minds. I hope to live for decades to come and to see this pass, where people will say, here it is. There's a new medium, and we're using it, and this is how people can really honestly and empathically connect. And I think when we look at these influencers and we say, wow, they're so successful, I look at them and I say, for the next year and a half, they've got a lot of people paying attention to them. They've hired up a staff, and most of them are most of that situation is going to end with somebody having to do something else. There's not like 20 million exercise gurus on Instagram who are all going to make $200,000 a year. There's like 50 of those people. And then there's a lot of people who do it on the side. People use the internet to show their best face. And that's what I tried to do when I was on the internet, is to show some of my worst faces, right? Like, hey, am I racist? Let me write this up because I think I just did something that might be racist, like as opposed to like, hey, look, I'm with beautiful black people. I must love black people. I mean, I'm in my 40s, so when I grew up, people and TV networks chose who the heroes were, right? I think it's better than anyone can put themselves out there to be a hero, but we need to have more hero filter.
Yeah. That's what I was talking about with the gatekeepers and the TV channels and everything. That's how I personally feel. And now the TV channels are not doing very well at all. So I think it's the right time to sort of move on.
Well, okay, so the TV channels are being super squeezed by the internet because everybody's watching all sorts of other stuff. So why do they care about what's on TV? And so now the TV says, if you want to be on TV, you got to prove that you can command attention on the internet. And how do you command attention on the internet? By being loud, by being persistent, by being difficult, by being lucky. I mean, you are persistent. You've made a number of interrogations of interesting people and tried to tease out the themes that you're exploring through conversations with other people. But it may turn out, Andrew, that talking to people that you're fascinated with is not a big moneymaker. And you just have to find a way to do it. And you continually have to beg with gatekeepers, and you continually have to question whether you're selling your soul if you, do this other gig on the side. And you'll continually have to, and that is the wage. You will get to talk to fascinating people around the world, but in exchange, you're going to have to work really hard to get people to pay you.
Yeah. Which is
that's one scenario.
It's a nice trade-off for now. I've had a nice time.
There's a great analogy a guy named Darius Kazemi made, which is like every time you post on the internet, you're buying a kind of a lottery ticket. That you're saying, maybe this one is going to like spark people's imagination.
Yeah, I guess so. Well,
and the world will come to you and say, tell me more, give me more, Andrew.
For me, it's just, I guess the way to do that is just to find the people who really interest me and then just see what happens, I suppose.
Well, because then even if your lottery ticket doesn't go anywhere, you've enjoyed the conversation and you've learned what you want to learn, which is a very enviable position, right? To be able to learn in public if you like learning.
Yeah. And the people it's just amazing experiences, including this one. And speaking of amazing experiences, here's a subtle segue, because I've mentioned this to you before, but because one of my favorite ever writers is Kurt Vonnegut.
Oh, sure.
So do you mind telling me that, because you've already told me, but the Kurt Vonnegut story?
I went to see him speak, and during the speech, I think he was sort of disparaging computers. And I mean, he was just ornery and cranky about all kinds of stuff, and funny, and honest, but very cranky and older and kind of like, brr. And so I went up to him afterwards, and I was sort of, at this time, I had long hair, and I had stopped combing it. I was still washing it, but I had stopped combing it, and it had begun to form into a sort of like a hair nest
right
on top of my head. I actually, let's see this. So actually I still have it here. This is my hair nest. Anyway, so I had this hair nest. I got it in a bag.
What do you mean you still have? What is that?
This is a clump of hair I cut off my head in 1996. It's like a clump of hair that grew that fashioned itself like roughly here.
Why are they just on the shelf behind you?
You got to keep the stuff that's important to you. And I'm like, hey, Kurt Vonnegut, the internet's amazing. You got to get I can write and I can connect with people and I don't need a publisher. It's totally amazing. And he was I think he was talking about like the tactility of paper and the honest communication that happens when people are exchanging things like documents and manuscripts and like conversation. And so he grabbed me by the back of my hair. Can you get this from a computer? Can you get this from a computer? Because I kept talking to him. He was like, no, you're wrong, and wanted me to go away, and I wouldn't go away. So he finally grabbed me by the hair, shook my head, and said, can you get this from a computer? Can you get this from a computer? And then stormed off.
Wow. Did it hurt?
I mean, I was just like adrenaline, you know.
Did it hurt emotionally?
No, you know, because I wasn't looking for approval from him. And I was so firmly convinced of my point that I thought, oh, he's wrong. He's being left behind by the computer. Yeah. I mean, I was like pretty evangelical, right? So if I came to you and I gave you the truth and you didn't buy it, I was like, oh, too bad, Kurt Vonnegut, you know?
What's a quick sort of future? Do you have an idea of where blogging and everything is going?
I don't know, you know, that I can really say what the future of expression is, except that people won't be stopped from talking about themselves and to themselves, and the challenges of how you can be open to hear from billions of strangers, but you only want to hear from the ones you like, and you want to protect yourselves from the ones that scare you, is a very big human challenge. Mm-hmm. And what's so funny for me to think is, as soon as we learn how to be together in this current medium, we're going to invent new stuff that'll make it hard to be together again. So that's telepathy. I don't know how we handle telepathic blogging. It's ahead of my time.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you think telepathy is actually next?
I think we got some more steps before we get there that will help telepathy seem more normal. But if you had told me or anyone in America 20 years ago, the president of the United States is going to tell you what he's thinking every half an hour he's awake, like by typing a short telegram out to the world, people would have said, that doesn't like, why would that be leadership? What is that? What value? Who does that? Yeah. That's not normal.
No, it's not normal. But then neither is Justin. And I'm delighted to have had one of the pioneers of the internet and standout figures of the 20th century on my show. I'm pleased to see that Justin appears to have shed his need for approval and found love and acceptance in his family. I love that Kurt Vonnegut story, but Justin has a million tales just like that didn't quite make the cut, as I'm trying to keep the podcast relatively short because of your dwindling attention spans. But if you are hungry for more, do go check out his website, links.net. You can also find the video version of this podcast on my YouTube channel. Just type the Andrew Gold Podcast, Justin Hall, into the search. And that features a bunch of clips also from links.net. That gives you an idea of the kind of excellent material Justin has up there. Also go to bud.com for Justin's marijuana company. Only the world's first ever blogger could get a domain name like that, bud.com. Quite amazing. If you appreciate this podcast, which takes a hell of a lot of work, please do subscribe and like and leave a review if you can. And next week I'll be talking to Race Cooper, a former porn actor, on racism he experienced in the porn industry. So you better subscribe.
Oh, that would be the end for my life, basically.
Yeah.
Because although I would never offend a child, if everyone knows about it, a lot of people would not talk to me anymore. Maybe also some close friends. And I mean, I can understand it because you don't have a good feeling about it. If you know, well, even the head boy was a pedophile.
If ever there was a need for a disclaimer, this would be it. Today's interview on the Andrew Gold Podcast delves into dark terrain in the form of a teenage pedophile, one who is also the head boy at his school. The past year, I've been in Germany researching the topic for a book after finding out about a state-sponsored therapy program called Don't Offend that doesn't report its patients to authorities, even if they have been offending. This is part of a liberal history and attitude towards minor attraction in Germany, where it's thought Madeleine McCann's abductor is from. In the past year, I've met many paedophiles, almost all of whom say they are of the non-offending variety. These include a 25-year-old woman attracted to babies, and a man who deserted his family without warning or explanation because he was afraid of his own desires for his 9-year-old daughter. Many of them, I've found, are mired in depression in the knowledge they can never have a fulfilling relationship with a consenting adult. The young man I spoke to for today's episode, Silas, is unlike any other I've met. He's young, chipper, and happy-go-lucky. He's adamant he'd never offend, but still makes use of his role as trusted head boy to get close to younger children at his school. Some of the things he says are shocking, and it's possible that a year of investigating this subject has made me a little desensitized to it. But I believe it's important to hear from him if we want to better understand the paedophilic mind and prevent further abuse of children. The world's leading expert, Dr. Michael Seto, believes 1% of the male population are exclusively paedophiles. Many doctors also believe that stigmatization of non-offenders is one of the greatest risk factors that can lead to them crossing the line. So it's time we talk about them. I feel it's important to mention that another thing I've learned in my time investigating paedophilia is that the effects of abuse on children is devastating and irreversible. I try to be open and understanding with Silas, purely because he tells me he has never and would never touch a child. And since he's so honest about everything else, I have no reason not to believe him. I hope you enjoy this podcast, even if it makes for an uncomfortable listen. Welcome to my podcast, Silas. How are you doing?
Well, I'm very fine today. I just finished my last exams and I'm very happy about it. So it's a nice day also here and I'll enjoy this podcast.
Oh, great. How did Corona impact on your exams?
Well, it was quite a different and a huge impact because I'm still going to school and I finished my grades this year.
And how has it been for you being away from school for the last few months? How have you felt?
Well, it's quite okay because everyone knows it. I mean, I don't want to go to school and it's so boring and so on. But in reality, I really I wanted to see my friends again. Also, I mean, I'm in contact with a lot of really children I do like at school.
Okay.
So I really also I missed them.
So, okay, am I right that you're the head boy of the school?
I was, yes, the last year.
How did that happen?
I don't know. It was a quick idea of mine. So I just I decided, well, why not? So I presented myself, and apparently the people liked me, so they voted for me, and yes, then I was the head boy of the school. So it happened really quickly, and it was amazing.
When did you start to realize that you were a pedophile?
It was really early because a lot of people discover it when they are around maybe 20 or even older. So, but in my case, it was very different because I was at a football team. I was playing in a football team in Spain, and I really I noticed that I started to like the boys of my team, from my team, and they.
How old were you?
I was about, maybe when it started, maybe 11, 12 years old.
Oh.
And that's why I said that it was at a really young age. So I started to realize, well, they are very attractive to me. And back then, I also had an idea that something is not right at all about me. But I didn't know at all what it was. So I knew, well, I can't say it to them because it would be kind of really creepy, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, not that creepy at all because they were my same age, maybe 1 or 2 years younger. So it's not that creepy, but I mean, there's also this stuff where you think, well, I don't want to be gay, or I don't want them to know it about me.
Yeah, because what made you think at 11 years old that because you've liked other boys who were 11, that made you a pedophile? Because my presumption, if that happened to me, would be that I was gay. I wouldn't even think about being a pedophile or something.
Yeah, I mean, the first thought I had was also that maybe I'm gay. And this was the beginning of the pedophilia, but I didn't realize it until a little bit more later. when I was maybe 14
Mm-hmm.
or something like that, because then, well, I was older, but I still liked the boys around the age of 10, maybe also 8, 11, and it did not, the age of the boys I liked did not grow with my same age.
Was that concerning for you?
Not really at all, because it was it was just the way it was, and I kind of just accepted it. At first, I wasn't proud of it. I just imagined, well, it's gonna be difficult, maybe. So I don't know. So because I didn't know how it would develop, also, because maybe it's just a phase in my life. But yes, as soon as I got older, I really knew, well, it will always be there, and I need to find a way of living with it. So I just can't just forget it, because it's there.
It's interesting because I've been speaking to a lot of pedophiles over the last year, hoping to write a book about the subject, and I found that I think you're quite unique. But, well, not necessarily unique, because like you, I think a lot of other pedophiles are trying to find a way to live with what they have, and many are also proud because it's who they are, and they, and they are frustrated that they're not able to be proud of who they are, which is something that I had never thought about, which was very interesting for me. But I think what seems to be unique about you is that you don't seem to have been so concerned, whereas I think a lot of people I've spoken to have been very depressed, at least for a stage, when they realized they were pedophiles, especially the understanding that they could never have a meaningful consenting adult relationship. But that doesn't seem to be too worrying for you. Is that right?
Yes, that's truly right. I mean, I also had some issues in my life when I was maybe around 17, or not 17, but 16, 15, where I also thought, well, I mean, it's everything so overwhelming, and everyone around me is getting a girlfriend, and everyone is having their first experience with sex, for example. And I couldn't. And there was also such a point, because there were some girls that were in love with me and they really liked me. They also tried to start a relationship with me, and I mean, I couldn't, because I just did not feel that it's the right thing, because I mean, I'm not attracted to them, and so why should I start a relationship with them? And it was quite difficult also to explain.
Yeah.
And that was a point of my life where I really also was kind of a little bit depressed, but not that much. So it was just also a very short moment.
Do you remember the first time that you told somebody else?
It was a friend of mine, and he's still a very good friend to me. And I mean, we're like besties. We're really good friends. And I knew him because of us, because of the same sport we did. We really had lived a lot of really good and also bad moments. So we really went through a lot of issues. And that was kind of also the main reason why I decided to tell him that I'm a pedophile. And it was via WhatsApp, because he had a new girlfriend, I guess, or there was something going on. He talked about it, and I just kind of had the desire to say to him and to tell him that, well, I'm a pedophile, because he was always talking about his relationships, and I could never talk about mine.
That's quite an extraordinary step, because you had never told anyone before, and the first time you decided to do it, you did it in writing.
Yes.
There's evidence and proof, and if he had reacted badly, you had to trust him a lot, not to send that around to everybody.
Yes, really a lot. But I mean, I really knew him, and I also knew he was... He's very liberal, so he's not just the type of guy that is constantly hating against other groups of people.
Yeah.
And so I really had also the gut feeling it's gonna be a good idea. And I mean, I didn't had the guts to to tell him in person because it's kind of embarrassing also a little bit.
Yeah. And he said he's going to support you, I imagine.
Yes. I mean, at first he didn't believe it. I said, well, there's something I need to tell you. I'm not straight. My sexual preference is something else, but it's also not the usual, so it's not gay. And so he had to guess it. And at first he really guessed other things like, well, also feeling, maybe being attracted to older people.
Oh,
and then also to animals.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Then I told him, no, it's kind of these people I'm attracted to are small, and they're also very young. And then he said, kind of, what the fuck, a pedophile? And yeah, it was. I mean, he did not believe it at first, and then I really told him, yes, it's the way it is. And
I think it's a discussion a lot of people have with their friends and everything. How would I react if my friend told me he were a pedophile? Did he ask you if you had offended or anything like that?
No, he did not ask this because he did not think I'm capable to this.
Okay. Is it offensive to ask somebody like you if you have offended?
No, because there's always different people, and there are good pedophiles and also bad pedophiles. So there can always be the possibility that a pedophile has offended a child.
And are you a good pedophile or a bad pedophile?
Yes, I'm a good pedophile, so I never offended a child, and I also would never, because it's just it's very harmful for the children.
Yeah. Is it something that you've had to try very hard to resist?
Yes, there were. I mean, there were also some phases in my life, so some stages where I really had more problems with not offending children, and now it's really it's okay. So I have a lot of contact to children, so maybe you think, or the normal this straight person thinks, well, if he's got more contact to children, maybe there's also a higher risk that he could offend a child. But in the case of good pedophiles, it isn't, because when you're really talking to children and you're playing with them, you really do have a lot of contact. You get a good feeling about the this sexual preference, because well, I'm doing something good for the children, and it's also good for me because I am enjoying this also.
Yeah.
And that's also a huge factor why I'm constantly trying to get in touch and with new kids, or yes, to make some contact with them.
Yeah.
And because it also helps me to realize the meaning in life. So then maybe I'm playing with them, and then at home maybe I can think about them again in a sexual way, because if I'm in love with some children, for example,
yeah,
I really enjoy being with them, but I can separate the sexual component with the childish component. So
yeah,
that yes. So
it's very strange. It's another thing I've learned from speaking to pedophiles is that there's it's not always just a sexual thing. A lot of pedophiles just love being around children, and there's a platonic love as well. So I guess that's what's going to be hard for a lot of listeners to understand, maybe, and for me to understand as well, when you talk about really, really enjoying being around children. I think that might make a lot of people uncomfortable, particularly when it's their own children, because they're imagining that you're getting, even if you're not touching them or anything, they're imagining that you're getting some sort of sexual thrill out of speaking to the child, which may not harm the child directly, but I suppose people don't like the idea of their children being looked after or hanging around with somebody who's getting a sexual thrill out of it.
Yes. I mean, I can completely understand it also. I mean, if I'm a parent, if I would be a parent one day, I mean, I would also have a strange feeling about this. So if I would know, well, the person speaking right now, playing with my child is a pedophile, I mean, I really would need to trust this person.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know how this person also feels, but I really need to know, well, he's a good pedophile. He's not a bad pedophile.
And I suppose there must be some people who are on the line, and I think that's the concern, that there are people who are good pedophiles who maybe give in to their desires, or do you think that's just not possible?
I mean, it can happen. It's more because of they're sometimes mentally not that strong. They follow their sexual
desires.
Yes, desires. Yes, it's not the usual thing. So it does not happen that.
Have you told anybody in your family, or who have you told? Who knows about this?
Just some friends of mine, some really close friends.
And your family? Does anybody know?
No, because I don't want to risk anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they would react. I mean, if I would tell it to someone, it would be my mom, because I really have a good relation with her, and I also really trust her. We do laugh a lot. I just did not tell it to her because I'm still living with her, and I want to move out, and I want to be. I don't want to be dependent on someone.
Yeah.
So just imagine if I tell her and she does not like it, or she does not really react how I thought. I mean, it would be really catastrophic.
Do you think she suspects anything? Does she ever ask why you haven't had girlfriends or boyfriends or anything?
No, I don't think she does suspect, because I told her that I'm gonna have children later on in my life, and that the perfect moment will come. And then that I'd like to have 3 children. She never asked me about this. So it's just the way it is, and she accepts it. I mean, the current situation. And every time I tell her that I'm gonna do something, or I'm gonna play with a child or talk to a boy, for example, she just says, well, that's really fine, and I really like how you're interacting with children.
Right. So how do you think people, parents, for example, or the teachers at the school would react if they knew their head boy were a pedophile?
Oh, that would be the end for my life, basically.
Yeah.
Because I mean, although I would never offend a child, if everyone knows about it, I mean, a lot of people would not talk to me anymore. Maybe also some close friends, and I mean, I can understand it, because you don't have a good feeling about it if you know, well, even the head boy was a pedophile.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm even worried about publishing this podcast because some people won't want to talk to me afterwards just because of association.
Yes.
So that's how strong I think the taboo is.
Yeah, it's really strong, and it's also difficult to break this stigma, because the media also is constantly just publishing the some news about pedophiles, but bad news. So if always someone is if a pedophile just offended and molested a child, the media is always there, and the media makes it also worse. So not every pedophile is automatically a child molester.
It must feel a little bit like, so I'm Jewish, for example, and there have been quite a few. Every time I hear something like Woody Allen did something bad, or Harvey Weinstein, or a name like that, it makes me think, oh God, everybody's going to think that Jewish people are, rich Hollywood people who treat women or badly or whatever it might be. Maybe it's how a Muslim person feels if they hear about a terrorist attack and they feel like, hey, that's not me, that doesn't speak for me. Do you think that's the same way that you feel every time you see another newspaper report of a pedophile who has attacked someone and you think, oh God, it's going to just be worse for us now?
I do not really think, well, it's gonna be worse for us, but I mean, I just I sometimes also read those articles, and I just keep thinking, I mean, hell no, what the fuck are you doing? I mean, why?
Yeah.
It's I mean, to the guy who molested the children.
Right. So I recently posted in a forum for pedophiles called Gemeinstadt allein, together rather instead of alone, when the news about Madeleine McCann, you know who she is?
No.
She was a girl in England who was abducted, taken away by somebody 10 or 15 years ago. And recently in the news, they found that it was an English girl, and a German man had taken her. And that was a big news story just a couple of weeks ago. I posted in this forum asking if anybody knew any information about this German man. And everybody in the forum was very, very offended by me asking that question and by asking if anybody knows this German pedophile. Do you know why they were offended?
I don't have an idea. It's difficult because I mean I wouldn't be offended, and that's
what they told me was, because I was just interested in whether you would be offended, and I notice as well that you talk about good pedophiles and bad pedophiles. Now in this forum, it's also a forum for non-offenders. They don't talk about good and bad pedophiles. They talk about pedophiles and then pedocriminals. So because I said, does anybody know this German pedophile? They wouldn't call him a pedophile.
Yes. So you threw everyone in kind of on the same path.
Yeah, I didn't mean to, but they would not use the word pedophile to describe that man. They would say a pedophile is somebody who is attracted to children and would never do anything to harm them. And then somebody who harms them is not a pedophile, but a pedocriminal.
Yes. I know about this issue. So it also happens in some other chats. Among the good pedophiles, there's the pedophiles who are really very strict with this issue. So they don't want to be called good pedophiles. They want to be just called pedophiles. It's not that important, but I mean, just if you know, well, he's a good pedophile and he does not offend anyone, it's okay.
Yeah. And what about then? This is something I have to ask you because you've not offended with children, but what about, and I think everyone will be wondering this listening, what about child sexual abuse material?
No, neither. I mean, it's also because you're indirectly helping other pedophiles to get money, so they have a reason to keep offending children. That's also why I'm strict against child abuse material.
But you must be tempted sometimes. Let's say if you've had a few beers and it's late at night,
Yes, of course. I mean, it's always difficult because there's the normal porn you can watch everywhere. But I mean, then there's the child porn, and you can't watch it anywhere. And that's it's kind of also a thrill.
But you've never tried?
No, I've never tried. I mean, I was quite a few moments. I was downloading also the Tor browser.
That's the secret browser.
Yes, all right.
Tor,
yes.
yeah.
but in the end, I didn't, because if someone would know or would discover that I really watch child porn, I mean, I'm still young and I would live my entire life with this issue. And so my entire personal relationships would also maybe get destroyed.
It could be a big story as well, because this, I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because you are so different to the typical pedophile that somebody can interview or find in a community, because often they tend to be a lot older, the ones, especially the ones who are willing to do an interview, because they feel a little bit like they've already lived their lives. Whereas an 18-year-old or 19-year-old feels like they have a lot more to risk. So that's quite extraordinary. And I imagine, if you were caught looking at child pornography or something, being so young and being the head boy of your school and everything, I think that would be a really big story.
Yes, of course. Yes.
So are you able to enjoy adult pornography?
That's a good question indeed. There were also some stages in my life. I mean, when I was younger, I enjoyed watching gay porn.
Okay.
Also, twink porn. So, you know what a twink is?
No.
Maybe a twink is kind of, he's already over 18, but he still looks a little bit younger. So maybe 15, 16,
okay.
kind of this.
Okay.
And twinks also really tend to shave their body hair.
Right.
And that made it also a little bit of it made it interesting to see, to watch. And then later on, I also enjoyed watching a normal porn, but just because of the guy penetrating the woman, because of the penis penetrating all the time.
Yeah.
And now there's an interesting turn in my life, because I am starting to enjoy also the body of women, you know.
Oh.
So just the vagina, or how it is called?
Vagina.
Vagina, yes.
Yeah.
Vagina. And so I really like to watch close-ups, so where you really see everything very close.
Huh.
And also some close-up cum shots and cream pies, for example.
Right.
And it's interesting, because I really didn't think that it would happen. But I just have to tell you that the sexual fantasies and imagination of sex with children is much more interesting than seeing and watching these close-ups.
I think from what I've researched, I mean, the difference between being an exclusive pedophile and a non-exclusive pedophile is very, very important to the happiness and general condition of somebody's life. I mean, if you're an exclusive pedophile, it means you can only get arousal from children, and if you're a non-exclusive, then I guess you can have that, and maybe it's even stronger, but you're able to have some attraction for an adult and able to live a normal life with that adult. There's a school of thought, according to not in Germany, but in Britain, they believe that pedophilia, there's an organization called Stop It Now, who believes that pedophilia is not a sexuality. They think that it is something that can be cured.
An illness, yes.
Is that offensive to you?
It's indifferent to me. I mean, everyone can think what he or she wanna think. I mean, it's not. I know what I am, and it's not really offensive.
They say, I spoke to their director, that it can be helped or cured or whatever, and that one of the ways is teaching people to enjoy climaxing to, adult pornography or something, which sounds like you're already doing that a little bit. I mean, so is there any hope for you that you would be, or is there any desire for you to be able to enjoy attraction to adults?
That's also a good question. I mean, I already told that I want to have 3 children later in my life. because yes, children are also the meaning of my life, and as I said, I really enjoy being with them, and I also want to see my own children growing up. The first step is finding a woman, and being able to have sex with her. And I mean, that's currently the most difficult step in my life, and also to do, because I mean, I'm mainly attracted to children, and just a little bit to women. So back to your question, I would like to experience being able to having sex with a woman, and also being able to feel the attraction to another woman. But however, I don't wanna be cured, just to say it in a way, because we just talked about curing this
condition.
Yes, this condition in quotation marks. I'd like to experience both. So I just don't wanna give up this sexual preference of children, being attracted to children, because it's already been a huge part of my life, and it made me also to the person I am right now.
Yeah. Well, speaking of like becoming the person you are, I'm wondering, did a lot of the pedophiles I met had very, very difficult childhoods? And there's a theory, a school of thought that can affect pedophilia, that it can make your attraction levels. I've heard that, when you're 10 years old, you are attracted to 10-year-olds. When you're 11, you like 11-year-olds. And sometimes that progression can be halted, often when something traumatic happens in your childhood. Was there anything like that might have been a cause?
No. I can't prove this theory with my own experience, because I really had a very happy childhood, and my parents made everything in order to make my childhood happy, and they really succeeded. There were no experiences I can remember where there happened something bad, or something that can is maybe able to affect this progression.
Wow, it just is what it is.
Yes, it just came to my life just as a gift from Santa Claus.
Wow. Have you been going to therapy at all?
No, I don't need it. I mean, when I was 15, 16 years old, I really had a lot of contact to other pedophiles through a German chat. And they really helped me, because I knew, well, there are also other people like me out there, and they're also feeling the same things I feel. I made also some friendships there, and it was kind of the therapy I needed back then.
It's just, it's remarkable how happy and in control you are, more than anybody I've spoken to, I think.
Yes, it's... I mean, sometimes I really think about this, and I really also think, well, why am I the guy who became, or who got this preference? Because statistically, there are just maybe 2 or up to 3% of pedophiles around the world, and
still a lot of people.
Yes, if you keep thinking about it, so if you 2 out of 100 people are pedophiles, and you don't know, because you
men at least.
Yes, men. So I don't know. I mean, it's also a very interesting thought, because I mean, a lot of people think that pedophiles are just men, but what if also there's the same percentage of women pedophiles? I mean, because you do not associate women with being a pedophile.
I met one.
What?
I met one. Yeah, while researching this, I went to meet her.
That's cool.
Yeah, but yeah, apparently, from what I can understand, it's now thought that about 1% of men are pedophiles, exclusive pedophiles, but up to 21% have some attraction to children.
Mm-hmm. Just at least a little bit.
Yeah, apparently about 21 out of 100 men, if being completely honest, would say that. Although it doesn't necessarily affect their lives in any way. Whereas 1% are completely exclusive, like yourself.
Yes.
With women, it's thought to be quite a bit lower, but it's still there. It still exists.
Yes, but I mean, so just think about it. So a lot of women do work at elementary schools, for example, or as child take carers, or how do you call it?
Yeah, child carers.
Yeah, child carers. So maybe they're also attracted to children, but maybe they think it's kind of the maternal attraction you feel.
There was a statistic I saw as well that showed that male pedophiles have a stronger sense of empathy towards children than non-pedophiles. So there might also be some sort of confusion or combination of a paternal feeling with the sexual feelings.
Yes, that might be possible, but I think it's more the case at women, maybe, if it might be true.
And so, do you have friendly relationships with a lot of children at school?
Yes, and I really love it, and I'm also proud of it because I mean, it's not very easy to build a friendship with a child. I know if you're already older. So the people, I mean, first the child will also think, so hell, what the fuck? Why is he talking to me? You know?
Yeah.
And then on the other side, also your friends, so your the friends your age, they also maybe think, why the fuck is he talking to children? You know? And so
I'm trying to imagine you at school, your friends and other people watching you, and you're always talking to the children.
Yes, I mean it's kind of like that. I mean they see it, but they do not think about maybe me being a pedophile.
Would it not be easier to stay away, and then there's no temptation at least?
Stay away from the children, you mean? Or
yeah.
Nah, it's difficult. It's more difficult. I mean, temptation for what?
I don't know, to sexualize them.
I mean, I also do sexualize them, but not in this hardcore way. I mean, I see a child, if I mean a boy, because I'm a homo pedophile. So if I really like him, so I try to talk to him. And so then there are two components. There's the friendship, which I really enjoy, and I enjoy being around children just because of the way they how they are, you know. Their character traits and everything. And then there's also the sexual component, because I mean he's very attractive to me, and that's also why it wouldn't be easier to stay away from them, because then I also would be more likely to do something bad, because I do not have this.
But that sounds a bit like a cognitive bias of yours, because you're saying if I'm away from them, I might be more likely to hurt them or something, and if I'm closer to them, then I'm less likely to hurt them. And do you see what I mean? It feels like maybe you've told yourself that. Is that fair to suggest?
Well, I don't think so, because if you, as I already told, if I'm in contact with children, I enjoy this moment, and if I'm away from them, I mean, I also get a little bit depressed, you know. So and that's why maybe then I would be more likely to harm a child. So,
but if you're not near the child, then you can't harm the
yeah,
child.
yes, that's also right. I mean, it's very difficult to explain. It's just a hypothetical case.
Yeah, I suppose the other moral issue is something you pointed out yourself, which is that if you had children, you wouldn't be comfortable with them hanging around with a pedophile that they, unless they really, really trusted that person. But you are hanging out with other people's children. So I guess that's the moral. Is that a moral issue? You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, it's kind of a bipolar, or how do I call it?
A paradox.
Yes, a paradox. Yes.
Yeah, it's very complicated.
Yes.
And I suppose most of the listeners will be thinking, 1% of the listeners will be thinking that they have the same thoughts as you. Many others will be understanding what you're saying. And then some will be thinking, yes, but he shouldn't be trying so hard to be around children all the time. That's what the problem is.
Yeah, I mean, maybe to those listeners, the children also, they really enjoy also talking to me and being or hanging around with me. And I'm also kind of a role model for them, because I'm also good at school, and I mean, I'm a very friendly person. I'm also always friendly to them, and I really see children as fully human. So as a fully human being, and you need to treat them like any other people. So
yeah, but that can be dangerous as well, treating children as though they were adults, because and you've said yourself that it's any sexual contact could harm them for life.
Yes, but I do separate this. So the sexual way is another completely thing, and regarding the sexual component, I do not treat them obviously as an adult, because it's not the way it is. I mean, they're still children. But I mean, when I'm talking to them, and when I'm just interacting with them, so I'm not mean to them, for example. So other people are mean to children, for example, especially people my age, and that's how also the children profit from this relationship.
I suppose you when you leave school, you will want to find a way to be near children. Do you have plans for that what kind of work plans do you have?
Well, I still don't know what I'm gonna do. The contact to children will always be there. Some ideas could be, for example, being a voluntary at some schools, or just helping out with homeworks, or helping out at a local football team, things like that.
A lot of the pedophiles I've met have been so obsessed with pedophilia that they have few other interests in their lives. Not all of them, but some people have. Is that the case with you, or do you have a lot of active hobbies and other ambitions?
I mean, pedophilia plays a huge role in my life, and it influenced the way I am. But I really do have a lot more other hobbies, really. And I also have really some other ambitions. So I want to earn a lot of money. And I also want to develop myself and become every day a really better person. And I also want to do something for the environment. So because I really like nature also. And I constantly am trying to educate myself a little bit more, just to outgrow my comfort zone.
I have to confess that I like Silas and can see why he was voted head boy by his peers. I'll never be able to get used to the way he talks about children, but appreciate he was honest with me about his innermost thoughts. Cognitive bias is a key theme talked about by doctors dealing with pedophiles. It's been found that these people have significantly higher levels of empathy towards children than non-pedophiles do. It means most of them, psychopaths apart, would never want to hurt a child. But the mind is able to concoct stories, leading many pedophiles to convince themselves that abuse won't hurt children, or that the child wants the attention. Silas is fortunately aware of the harm any abuse causes, But perhaps he uses cognitive bias to convince himself that it's better for everyone that he keep children around him. If you enjoyed this podcast, all I want is for you to like and review it. Apparently that helps, although I'm not sure exactly why or how. Oh, and share it around. Hopefully the subject matter of this episode won't lose you too many friends. Join me next week for a podcast with Robbie Lyle, the charismatic presenter of Arsenal Fan TV. I'm not an Arsenal fan, but I find Robbie and his life story fascinating. Among other things, we'll talk about abuse he's received on his way to astronomical success.